Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Planning Application Committee on the 9th of May 2023. Item 1, Chair's welcome evacuation procedures. I would ask that you ensure that you are all signed in on the sign-in sheet provided. These will be used in case of an evacuation. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank building on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future publication on the Council's website. Please can I ask that you turn your mobile phone off or at least to silent for the duration of the meeting. Item 2, do we have any apologies? Okay, so Councillor Shepherd. Does anyone know where Councillor Hartshorn is? Has anyone had an apology from him? No? Okay, so he may well be in transit. If we could just note that Councillor Shepherd isn't here. Thank you, and we've got apologies from her. Item 3, the minutes. Are members of the Planning Application Committee happy that I signed the minutes off as a true and accurate reflection? Yeah, I'm not seeing any dissent, so thank you. I shall sign those now. Item number 4, declarations of interest. So do any members wish to declare any interest not included on the schedule? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to applications numbers 3, 4 and 5, they are council applications and they fall under my portfolio holder remit as the Cabinet Member for Business and Regeneration. However, I have not had any discussions with any planning officers about these and will treat them as any other planning application. I have not prejudged the applications in themselves. And whilst I'm here, Chair, on declarations of contact, the same as before, that I have had representations on application number 1 from residents and businesses in the area. Again, I gave no indication as how I would speak or vote on the item.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Does any other council have any declarations of interest, first of all? Councillor Cape.
Yeah, thank you. I believe that we all received emails including video footage from one of the objectors. So I'm declaring that, although I haven't made any comment on those. And also an email from an objection from Mrs. Condacor. So I've received that email as well.
Yeah, is that the same for other members as well? Okay, can I just have a show of hands? Members, yeah, okay. So if we just note that everyone has received those same declarations of contact. That's item 1. Yeah. Councillor Markham.
I've also had an email from a member with reference to item 2, but again, I've given no indication either one way or the other.
Thank you. Do I have any other declarations of contact? No? Okay. In that case, we'll move then to our first planning application of the evening, which is the Crow's Nest on Crow Hill Road. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all ought to notify that we had an addendum sent to us. It was sent by email at 12:22 today, the 9th. I didn't receive that addendum till I got home from work at about 4 o'clock. I don't think this meeting ought to proceed any further till we've had time to view this email and think about it. I think this should have been sent previously, a couple of days at least before, so that we could think about it, look at it and pass comments. I think it's a bit naughty to be sent, you know, a few hours just before a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. That is noted. The very nature of addendums is that they are last-minute things. I appreciate that was probably more last-minute than we would like. Well, I was going to sort of wait for the officers to do their bit first before I came to the addendum. But I just wanted to check, are all members of the Planning Application Committee themselves, have you all had a chance to study the addendum and look at it? So Councillor Hammers, you're saying no, that you haven't. There is a copy there. You got it? Yeah. All of the councillors have studied it, so as far as you're aware, yeah, and you're all happy with it. Okay, so I will proceed because the majority of members of the Planning Application Committee, I know Councillor Hammersley will probably be studying it now to have a look at it. It's not, you know, the heaviest of reading that we had on this panel, so I am happy to allow it, Councillor Gutteridge, because we actually also have people like Warwickshire County Council's Highways team here tonight to answer questions which, you know, as you can appreciate, they're quite difficult to get hold of, and I think it would serve us better to proceed with them here in situ tonight. Yes.
I disagree, Chair.
Well, that's you're entitled to, but that's
I
what
don't think
my
so.
ruling is, Councillor
The committee
Guttridge.
have not read the addendum.
It's one member of the committee,
Yes, one member. But
and
it's-
one
it's
member
my-
is now looking at that.
It is my residents of Whitestone that are going to suffer.
Councillor Hammersley, would you like me to pause the meeting and suspend the meeting for 10-15 minutes to allow you to study the addendum? Yeah, okay, and in that case, I will recess this meeting for till 20 past. Okay, that's 15 minutes, and that should be adequate time for everyone who needs to study it to have a look at it. Okay, thank you. We're suspended and we'll resume at 6:20. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your perseverance. It is now 20 past, so we have had a quarter of an hour for people to study the addendum as printed. Councillor Hammers, can I confirm that you have now had enough time to study that? Obviously, it's important that you have a look at it because you are on the Planning Application Committee. Councillor Gutteridge, I hope that you now feel that you've had enough time to study it as well and have a look at it.
Personally, no. I don't think I've had enough time to look at it.
Well, I'm sorry, but we are going ahead, Councillor Gutteridge, so I appreciate you may not feel that you've had enough time, but, you know, it has gone out. You've had no more or no less time than anybody else. So I'll ask Karina to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 1 relates to a full planning application for the erection of a single-storey shop, which is intended to be used for uses falling within Use Class E. The shop would be sited upon part of the existing car park belonging to the Crow's Nest pub in Nuneaton. The scheme also proposes alterations to the existing site access and parking arrangements for the pub, along with a built-in ATM machine and cycle stands. The Crow's Nest pub sits on the corner of Crow Hill Road and East Borough Way, with vehicular access taken from Raven Way. Raven Way leads to a precinct of shops and commercial premises. The units are mostly used for purposes falling within Use Class E, save for an existing takeaway which is classed as a sui generis use. The pub, the existing premises on Raven Way and the application site are all located within a designated local centre known as Crow Hill Local Centre, as defined by Policy TC3 of the Borough Plan. Members may recall the application being presented to Planning Applications Committee on the 18th of April, where members resolved to defer the item. Representatives from the County Highway Authority are in attendance this evening to assist with any highway safety queries. The key issues to consider in the assessment of this application are the principle of the development, impact on the town centre, impact upon the Crow Hill local centre, residential amenity, visual amenity, impact on trees, impact on highway safety, as well as flooding and drainage. With regard to the principle of development, the site is located in Nuneaton, which has a primary role for employment, housing, town centre uses and service provision. The site is also located within a designated local centre. It is therefore considered that the provision of a Use Class E shop in this location is acceptable for the purposes of the Borough Plan 2019. The site is not located within the town, but is located within a designated local centre. Consideration needs to be given to the impact upon town centres as a result of development, which is classed as a main town centre use being located outside of the town centre boundary. The MPPF gives guidance on when a sequential test is necessary. In this case, it's considered that the proposal relates to small-scale retail development serving a more local need, which would not compete with the town centre in terms of consumer choice. The Council's planning policy team have confirmed that the small-scale convenience shops provide a tiny percentage of Nuneaton's food and grocery market. Given the very low percentage of overall share of food and grocery shopping, the proposal is unlikely to adversely impact the vitality and viability of the town centre. The Borough Plan Policy TC3 is relevant to the determination of the application. It states that the development within local centre will be acceptable in certain circumstances. This additional unit for Use Class E purposes will help in the vitality and viability of the existing centre by adding further consumer choice. Many of the objections received relate to competition between the proposal and existing businesses. However, this is not a material planning consideration, which can be considered in the assessment of this application. With regard to residential amenity, separation distances set out within the Council's adopted SPD are met between the proposal and surrounding occupiers in terms of light and privacy. A noise impact assessment was submitted to support the application, which the Council's environmental health team are satisfied with. No objections are raised subject to the imposition of a condition limiting deliveries between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. It is therefore considered that there will be no unacceptable harm to residential amenity as a result of the scheme. The proposed scheme would not be visible from Eastborough Way, given the existing screening of the site, mainly from the existing pub. There would be views achieved from Raven Way and Crow Hill Road. The unit is to be single-storey with a flat roof and would be finished in a mixture of plain and textured brick and sections of cladding. It's considered that the design would be acceptable when having regard to the character and appearance of the area. With regard to existing trees, there are no trees protected by tree preservation orders on site. Some existing trees on site are to be removed, all of which are Category C trees. The Council's tree officer has been consulted on the application and is satisfied with the revised tree removal plan. With regard to highway safety, a parking survey was submitted to support the application. In order to accord with the Council's parking standards, the proposed store is required to provide 16 car parking spaces. However, 14 are proposed specifically for the store. It is noted that the public house car park nearby would be shared informally with the store, and that the shortfall of 2 spaces could be accommodated in this way, as outlined within the submitted parking survey. No objection from the County Council Highway Authority has been received on the basis of the proposed parking arrangement. Access drawings have been through a Stage 1 road safety audit, and the County Highway Authority have no objection to the scheme, subject to conditions. The Highway Authority have requested a formal pedestrian crossing with tactile paving across Raven Way and on both sides of the entrance off Raven Way. The precise details of this element of the scheme is to be agreed via condition. With regard to flooding and drainage, the site is located within Flood Zone 1, an area at lowest risk of fluvial flood risk. The Environment Agency flood map shows that the site is at a low risk of surface water flooding. There are no concerns in relation to flood risk or drainage matters. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions as set out in the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I now have a number of speakers, so I'll start with objectors, and I'll start with Ms. Mudwadia. So, Ms. Mudwadia, when you're ready, you have your 3 minutes.
I have been informed that the 8 videos that I have taken over the last few weeks have been sent to all members of the Planning Applications Committee. I am under the impression that all have seen these videos. The videos all clearly justify the narrowness of Raven Way. They also show the wider turns the vehicles have to take when turning into Raven Way from Crowhill Road. Video 2 shows a delivery vehicle trying to exit Raven Way. It illustrates how congested Raven Way can get as cars are having to mount up the curb to allow the truck to exit Raven Way. This also causes a safety issue for the pedestrians walking on the footpath. Allowing the proposed shop will add to the existing congestion and causing the traffic to be out of control. If another truck was to drive into Raven Way to deliver to the proposed shop, as they have a number of deliveries within a day, the vehicle would need to reverse back to allow the existing truck to pass. The reversing truck would cause further problems onto Crowhill Road. Video number 3 shows a large wagon that was delivering to the pub. The vehicle, upon entering Raven Way, had to drive on the wrong side of the road in order to take a wider turn to get into the pub car park. How is another truck going to drive in or out while this is happening, as well as potentially having a former pedestrian crossing on Raven Way if this proposed shop was to go ahead? Would this be safe? Also to note, the loss of car park spaces on the pub car park. When there are events, wakes or celebrations, the pub car park gets extremely busy, as it was on Sunday with a bank holiday. The overflow of cars will then be forced to park on the side streets, which will have an impact on the local residents. In the past, driveways have been blocked by customers using the pub, with cars being left overnight. What will the local council do to prevent this from happening? In regard to the former crossing, there still is no clarification as to exactly where this will be placed. The Road Safety Audit and Warwickshire County Council both raised concerns on the current crossing plan. There is still no clarity as to who the verge belongs to, and it was said that a suitable location can be agreed if the verge is not available. Where is this going to be, and how safe is it to put a crossing on a very busy junction? In the last meeting, concerns were raised regarding the emergency services. Has an assessment been carried out with the emergency services? Have they done a site visit? Have highways carried out a site visit on different days and times? Did they do a simulation assessment? As if they did a simulation assessment, this would not be a true accuracy of what occurs on Raven Way. I would urge a site visit to be undertaken if one wasn't done on different times and days in the week. Can 2 or more delivery vehicles come in and out of Raven Way at the same time if deliveries were to clash with the proposed shop and the existing businesses in the Crowhill shopping parade? Currently, there are no restrictions on Raven Way. There have been times where the parade car park is full and cars are then parked on the curbside before and after the pub entrance on Raven Way. Another thing to note on today's document, 3.3, The number of HGVs using Raven Way will be low. It is not low. There is a parade of shops there. We have daily deliveries, including the butchers, including the pharmacy. I urge the Planning Committee to object this proposal due to the road safety issues concerning Raven Way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Mudwalia. Can I just ask, do any members have any points of clarification they would like to ask of Ms Mudwalia? Councillor Cape.
Yeah, I did manage to look at the videos. Exactly what time of the day were they done at? Was it done at different times on different days or the same time on each day?
I think, Councillor Cape, they've all got time and date stamps on them.
I had I time and date stamped all the videos. Videos were different times. I've got video at 12:54 in the afternoon. There's a video at 3:12 in the evening. There's a video at 9:42 a.m. There's another video at 12:30. Another video just after 12:30. That was 2 deliveries that actually clashed at the same time. So yeah, I did send screenshots with all the videos.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any other points of clarification? I'll turn to our colleagues from Warwickshire County Council as well and say, do you have any points of clarification that you would like to, at this point in time? Anything that you've heard? No? Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll now go to my second speaker, and that is, sorry, I lost my piece of paper. That is Councillor Cooper, although you're not speaking as the ward councillor, you're speaking as an objector. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to say I would ask committee to think very hard before they make a final decision on this proposal. To modify Raven Way and how that would be accomplished. To widen it would mean either cutting into trees and hedgerows along the way, along the bridleway, and or taking down walls and expanding into the Crow Nest car park. Either would mean major disruption and probably the closure of the road, without which would raise serious health and safety issues. The closure would mean the complete isolation and destruction of all the other businesses in the area. I would just say that I believe this to be an inconceivable idea. And I do think there'll be real congestion problems, even worse than there is now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cooper. Any members have any points of clarification they'd like from Councillor Cooper? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone indicating. So in that case, I will go to our next speaker, which is Mr. Edge, who is part of the Pegasus Group. I'm speaking in favour of the... Oh, sorry. My apologies. I've missed one. I don't know how I've missed you out, Councillor Guttridge. My apologies. So, yeah, before we do that, we will hear from Councillor Guttridge as the ward councillor. I do apologise, Councillor.
Thank you. You can't miss me. I'm rather large. It is. Start the clock. As ward councillor and resident of Whitestone, I am against this planning application. Why do we need another single-storey shop with an ATM machine in a public house car park? We already have existing features in the parade of shops. A fish and chip shop, a butcher's, a very good convenience store, a hairdresser's, a chemist, a nursery, and a beautician's coffee shop. Down the road, we have Horston Grange with a variety of shops, co-ops, farm stores, whatever, and a chip shop. Also in Attleborough, we have a parade of shops. Down the road, we have a parade of shops at Whitestone. So we do not require any more shops. Residential amenity. The borough plan states, impact to the Crow Hill local centre. The policy T3 states that the function, viability and vitality is maintained or improved. It won't be improved. Contributes positively to the range of services on offer. We've already got more than enough services. does not harm the amenities of the local residents. It does. Transport, highways is a problem. When you are walking your children to the nursery or going to the shops in your mobility scooter with the lorries and the cars coming past, it is frightening. Number 4, does not result in the loss of ground floor requirement, but if you turn over the page on the policy, it is not relevant as there is no loss of retail commercial floor space to residential use. I fully understand the impact on the trees, and I will move over to the impact on highway safety and parking. And this is out of the agenda. With regard to parking, the Transport Demand Management parking does not contain a specific standard for public houses and requires these to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. We have not got enough parking spaces on the pub car park. They've just had a new manager or tenant in there, and it is rammed. He is running events 4 or 5 nights a week. So we have not got enough parking spaces. I see, and for the benefit of them, they have given us another mobility place, but that's at the cost of the other parking spaces, I believe. It says discussions have been held between the agent and highways regarding the crossing point and are currently shown on the plans, would not be accepted. Also, it says that we do not know who owns the land, yet we're going to put a crossing there. We're still waiting for that. Can I just finish? I'd just like to say the reasons for not granting permission, it would materially harm the character and appearance of the area and the living conditions of our neighbours and occupiers, and would be unacceptable in terms of traffic safety and convenience. We've had a petition of 1,505 petitions signed, 342 objectors, including plus our MP, Marcus Jones, and Councillor Tony Cooper. I, for one, don't think it's viable.
Okay, thank you. Can you wrap up, please? Thank you, Councillor. Okay, do any members have any points of clarification they wish to seek? No? Okay, so moving on then, we'll come back then to Mr. Edge, who is part of the Pegasus Group and speaking, I believe, as part of the agents. Okay, so you have your 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Chris Edge and I'm a planning consultant for Pegasus Planning Group, speaking on behalf of the applicant SCP Properties. Members will recall that I spoke in support of the planning application at the previous planning committee. This evening, our highways consultant is going to speak in support of the planning application too, and will be able to answer questions on highways matters. I will briefly restate the planning position for the site and proposed development. The site is located within the defined local centre of Crow Hill, and the relevant local plan policy confirms that within local centres, retail development is acceptable, in principle, subject to certain criteria. Your officer has addressed these criteria in the report and considered that the proposed development is acceptable and does not conflict with the local plan policy. This includes an assessment of the size of the convenience store, as well as addressing the matters of need, impact, and the sequential test. In short, our assessment aligns with your officer in that the proposed development would increase the choice of shops and services for local residents within the local centre, which is where planning policy dictates that new shops should be located. The officer correctly points out that in these circumstances, competition and choice are not planning matters and cannot be a reason for refusal. Importantly, your officer also confirms that the new convenience store would make a valuable contribution to serving the day-to-day needs of both existing and new residents. As such, the principle of a new convenience store within Crow Hill Local Centre is policy compliant. In relation to design and other technical matters, we have been working with your officer to bring forward a well-designed and policy-compliant proposal for almost a year. During that time, matters relating to trees and highways in particular have been addressed. The end result is that there are no outstanding objections from any statutory consultee subject to conditions which the applicant is happy to agree to. Trees that are to be retained will be protected by way of a condition requiring measures to be put in place during construction to protect tree roots. Only a small number of poor quality trees will be removed which are not protected. I will leave the subject of highways matters to our highways consultant. Before I do so, you will note that your planning officers included additional information in the report on the impact of the proposed development on the wider highway network. Their conclusion is that the impact on the highway network will not be severe, and as a result, there cannot be any highway reasons for refusal of the planning application. Additionally, and in response to a member's request, a second additional accessible parking space has been provided within the car park. Hours of opening and deliveries will be secured by condition, and details of the proposed plant must be submitted prior to any plant being installed. This includes the requirement for a noise impact assessment too. All of this will control the impact on residential amenity. As a result, we respectfully request that members approve this planning application in line with your office's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, do any members have any points of clarification they wish to seek at this point? No? Okay, in that case, we'll go to our final speaker on this matter, which is Mr. Miles, who's speaking on behalf of ADL Transport as the transport consultant, which Mr. Edge mentioned a few moments ago. So you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Andy Miles, and I'm the Principal Transport Planning Consultant for ADL Traffic and Highways Engineering, speaking on behalf of the applicant SCP Properties. ADL have comprehensively assessed the proposal with regards to access for pedestrians, cars, servicing and emergency vehicles, as well as its associated parking and traffic impacts. Access to the site is served by Crow Hill Road and Raven Way. Crow Hill Road is in excess of 7.3 metres width and Raven Way is 6 metres wide, conforming to National Design Guidance Standards. Visibility displays at both the site access and Crow Hill Road junctions are in accordance with the design speeds of the road, and a review of recorded accident data determines that there are not any apparent road safety issues associated with the existing access arrangements which serve the local centre. The site is in an accessible location conducive to trips by walking and cycling, which is important given that the convenience store will offer a local facility to the nearby residential catchment. Continuous pedestrian footways of minimum 1.8 metres width are provided to the site, and the applicant has agreed to provide improvements in the form of dropped curbs and tactile paving to assist the pedestrians across Raven Way and the site access junctions. Further to an independent road safety audit, it was also agreed to inset the Raven Way pedestrian crossing point to reduce the crossing distance and further improve pedestrian safety. The case officer and highways officer are content to provide a condition on this matter as there is more than one acceptable arrangement. Subsequent to the deferred committee, ADL have provided additional vehicle tracking to support the vehicle access arrangements. These show the delivery vehicle entering Raven Way, avoiding a car waiting at the giveaway line, a fire tender entering the site via Raven Way, avoiding the delivery vehicle, and a typical rigid goods vehicle exiting the local centre, passing the delivery vehicle on Raven Way. The vehicle tracking demonstrates that there is sufficient width to pass in either direction if goods vehicles were to arrive and depart simultaneously. It is, however, considered that if this were to occur, exiting vehicles would more likely stop momentarily to give way to the vehicle entering Raven Way or the site. The number of goods vehicles accessing and exiting Raven Way will continue to be low with the proposed development. Deliveries are consolidated to reduce number of trips and are programmed with sufficient time buffer between each delivery to reduce likelihood of conflict occurring according with the delivery management plan. Car parking has been surveyed over a 3-day period to determine the existing parking demand, and our assessment with the addition of proposed parking determines that there would be sufficient spare parking capacity during the peak periods. Further to the previous committee, an additional disabled accessible bay has been provided in the most convenient location nearest the store entrance and crossing point to always ensure the availability of one space. Cycle parking is provided in a convenient and visible location close to the store entrance. The majority of the traffic associated with the proposed convenience store would not be newly created trips and instead would be existing on the road network in the form of pass-by, diverted and shared or transferred trips, where the visit to the convenience store would not be the primary trip purpose but incidental of the primary trip. For example, travelling to or from work before stopping to visit the store. ADL provided an assessment within their supplementary note which concludes the increase in traffic will be around 3.3% on Crow Hill Road and 1.3% on East Borough Way, which is less than a daily fluctuation in traffic flow and hence will be imperceptible. We can conclude in alignment with the Council Highways Officer that the development would not be contrary to the National Plan and Policy Framework, where a development should only be refused on highway grounds if there is an unacceptable impact on highway safety or residual cumulative impacts on the road network are severe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any points of clarification, Mr. Miles? Councillor Shires.
Thank you. On regards to traffic impact, point 6.3, is it right, am I reading right, that the estimates for traffic flow is based on counts taken back in 2018, estimated for 21 and 2019, so they're not current, is that correct?
DFT traffic counts, they do undertake the counts, and then in 4 years they might undertake estimates, but the traffic will be broadly similar. If it wouldn't vary significantly from what was undertaken previously, and the estimates are based on temporary growth factors, so they do account for additional committed development and growth in traffic.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, if I may. So, you say that in your answer to Councillor Shires that it should take account of additional developments in the area. Can you actually give a categorical assurance to the committee that your workings out include the additional houses, which have gone up at some rate, it must be said, in the north of Nuneaton, in Weddington and St Nick's, which cross through down Eastborough Way, out through Attleborough and up to the Treble Four? So have you actually factored in, for definite, those additional vehicles coming through from those developments? There must be at least 2,000 or 3,000 extra houses which have gone up since 2018, at least in that period of time.
I think fundamentally it wouldn't change the overall argument that we've put forward in terms of the traffic flow wouldn't change significantly enough to make the impact of the convenience store severe.
But we do know that a large proportion of the traffic out of the borough goes through the Treble Four. That is established in a lot of the documents that we do have as part of the borough plan, that we do have a greater proportion of people travelling out of the borough for work, mainly through to the A444 and the M6, although I do admit there are some which go the other way to the A5, Hinckley, M69 that way, but there is a large proportion which goes out to Coventry and Birmingham. So I don't think your figures are the most robust that they should be, bearing in mind the patterns of development in Nuneaton. So bearing in mind what you've just said, if you look at paragraph 6.4 of your report, that's on the addendum, and I did read it before coming, Chair, but I haven't had a chance to question anyone on these figures, so forgive me. You've said at 6.4 that you are estimating that there will be 78 two-way vehicle trips in a peak hour additional, if I'm reading this right, and up to 812 two-way vehicle movements daily. What is the baseline that again? What is the baseline that is again? So what is the current two-way vehicle trips at the moment in a peak hour in and out of Raven Way? And what are the total for the daily movements? Because surely for those stats that you've given, in order for them to mean anything, we need to know what to compare them to.
Well, just going back to the point on the validity of the traffic flows we've used for the baseline. These traffic flows are taken from Department for Transport, so they're very valid. And I think when you say obviously the counts were undertaken in 2018 and they've undertaken estimates since then, we have to remember that since COVID-19, a lot of people are working from home as well, so the traffic flow is actually reduced on the whole. In response to your point on Raven Way and the impact, it's important to note that the large majority of these trips will be transferred, shared, passed by and diverted, and the actual impact will not be 812 trips. You won't notice that.
With respect, Chair, that wasn't my question.
No, I appreciate that is the answer we've got, and we have to make of that what we will, I think, Councillor Wilson. They'll provide what answers as that they see fit. We have to sort of look at that in the mix of all the other information that we have. And I say, you have your local knowledge, they have their sort of statistics. So I'm assuming you will sort of work it out in your own mind for what it is. But I'll say no more on that.
The problem is, though, Chair, in my mind, I might know, but in order to defend anything at appeal, it has to be substantiated.
Well, we also have Warwickshire Highways, and maybe we can bring them in slightly later on the conversation and perhaps put some of these same questions to them. But he's within his rights to give you the answer that he's given you. I know it's as frustrating as it may be, because I am also a fairly local resident living in Bulkington myself, which is just down the road, and I'm fairly familiar, as are many of the councillors here. So, we have to sort of temper what we have. And hopefully we'll come back to Mr. Miles and also to our highways officers as well and see if they can shed some light. Please do.
Thank you, Chair. So, again, taking those figures in paragraph 6.4 about the 78 two-way vehicle trips in a peak hour and 812. What is that currently modelled against in terms of developments? Is that factoring in HSG, I think it's 9, and HSG, well, I can't remember the numbers, but it's basically the ones next to the Creme on Heart of England Way, and is that also factoring in Golf Drive developments?
Sorry, are you asking about the 812 trips?
So you've given us that your estimate of the impact of this development will be 78 two-way extra vehicle trips per peak hour and 812 daily. Is that on the current developments, or have you factored in the additional developments which are going on in the area with Heart of England Way and Golf Drive?
It's based on tricks data, and that is you take a number of convenience store sites and an average of those trips determine what the traffic generation flow is. So it's based on existing convenience stores, surveys undertaken for movements in and out of that store, and that is where the traffic generation is determined from. It doesn't consider what's happening around this site.
So just to be absolutely clear on this, you have not factored in the additional 350 odd which are going on Heart of England Way and the 621 on Golf Drive, because I think this is critical information for the committee, Chair.
Traffic generation is determined on the basis of what the gross floor area is applied to trip rates. That's the national standard for planning applications.
All right, thank you. Do I have any other points of clarification? Councillor Markham and Councillor Cape.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask you, you said that you did survey about the parking over a 3-day period. What sort of times was that? Was that from sort of 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 or 10 o'clock at night when that premises would be open, or when was it, please?
I actually cannot recall off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure it was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And that was the 3 days, so 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So it picked up the core part of the day.
Can I just ask what 3 days they were? Were they over a weekend, or were they over weekdays, or what, please?
Yes, it was a Thursday, Friday and Saturday. So it picks up a neutral weekday, the Friday and the Saturday.
Okay, Councillor Cape.
Thanks. There's an old quote that the map is not the land. In other words, theories and modelling do have an important part to play, but then you have to look at the reality of it on the ground. So as an example, on paragraph 2.2, when it shows carriageway widths, nothing seems to be taken into account on foliage and overhanging trees and that kind of thing. Have you actually seen the site and looked at the impact that the foliage has on limiting the access of the HGVs? That's just the first part of the question.
So just to clarify, the widths that we've given, they are based on topographical survey information, so they are accurate to the millimetre. But the foliage, it's the highway authority's responsibility to actually maintain that to the border, to the curb line of the road. So that's with the highway authority to maintain it. It's not for the applicant.
Okay, that's the answer I'm going to get. I understand your answer, and if the Highways Agency don't do that, then therefore it limits the width of the road, which is actually what it is at the moment. In lots of your other paragraphs, you use phrases like it is likely that exiting drivers will give way, etc. On some of the video footage that we've seen, and in fact driving around the area myself, what a lot of drivers have been forced to do is actually stop and reverse. Now, that is not giving way. That's conducting another traffic manoeuvre, which when the roads behind it are already congested, can cause a whole lockjam. So in reality, people are being forced to give way, and the only way that they're able to give way is by reversing back up the carriageways. And this surely is going to have an impact on safety.
I guess all I'd say to that is an existing arrangement. I don't believe that it's ever been raised as an issue in the past historically, and it's obviously been something that's been talked about now. Manual for Streets supports that the design of an access junction where the HGV traffic flows are low shouldn't be dominant for the HGV. Otherwise, you'd have significant pedestrian crossing widths, you'd have significant radiuses, and you'd encourage speeding by the general population for the sake of a low number of HGVs, and that is what the situation is here, I believe.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. I do have one question myself, and it's to do with the map that's on the second to last page in our booklets. And on it, you've shown drop curb and tactile paving. And my concern is why the drop curb at that point? And is it anything to do with the fact it's to do with the vehicle turning circle, so vehicles can more easily mount the pavement and go over it so they don't actually spill out into the middle of the road? Because to me, that's one of the reasons you put a drop curb at that point. It's just to enable that turning circle for vehicles to mount pavement, in which case, you know, we're looking at, you know, a risk as far as I'm concerned to residents. So can you sort of clarify why those drop curbs are actually at that point, if they're not there for vehicles to run over and sort of mount the pavement so they don't spill out into the middle of the road? Is there any other reasoning that you can give me for that?
The drop curbs and the tactile pavement are just to assist the pedestrians and ambulant people who are crossing the road. At present, the existing crossing doesn't have drop curbs. People have to bump down the curb if they were in a wheelchair or otherwise, and therefore we're providing those improvements to actually benefit the area. It doesn't actually change the curb alignment, so therefore it doesn't impact the existing use of that road for HGVs turning in and out of the road.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have in front of us then a proposal to grant planning permission subject to conditions as printed. So obviously to enable discussion now, I need a proposer and a seconder. So Councillor Charles, you're happy to propose? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smith. Okay, so I will open the floor to any members. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask some questions of the highways, seeing as...
Yeah, you certainly may. I'm sure that's what they're here for.
Thank you. So, hopefully you'll be able to assist with the questions that I asked. So, as you'll see from paragraph, and I'll refer to it again at paragraph 6.4 of the addendum that we have, it says that there are 78 two-way vehicle trips in a peak hour extra generated and 812 two-way daily. Are you able to give us the baseline against what that is judged? So what are the figures as they currently stand minus the proposed shop?
So the figures are based off data from TRIC surveys, which is an industry standard. They take surveys from similar stores in similar locations. You can filter out locations, and that's how you come up with those figures. In a sense, it does take into account additional growth as the surveys are filtered by the population in that area as well.
Chair, can you understand the frustration that I'm having here? Because I just want to know what the baseline is now. In order to determine whether there is a severe impact on the highway network, we should theoretically know what the current figures are for minus this proposal with, and then be able to judge that against the proposal to determine whether that is severe. Now, all the information I'm getting is saying industry standard this, industry standard that. I just want cold, hard facts on what it is on the ground.
I agree. I mean, I think it would, if you were able to give us cold, hard facts and statistics that we could look at, that would really enable our members to come to the appropriate decision. So whatever you can do to support us in that would be very much appreciated. You know, please, you know, we may not be experts in the field, but this is a group of very intelligent people with some of them a number of years of experience, like Councillor Wilson. So anything that you can give us, please don't give us flannel. Please give us cold, hard facts wherever you can, please, because we would appreciate that very much so. Thank you.
The only cold hard facts you've got here are the numbers that are in paragraph 6.3, which gives you the DFT estimates for the 2021-2019 flows. Okay, they're the baselines. Because they've growthed up from 2018 to those years, that will include an allowance for the housing build out up to that year. So whatever's gone on the Heart of England Way, Golf Drive, Eastborough Way, of those occupations, but only up to the years 2019, 2021. So there'll be more committed development coming from those other sites that aren't in those numbers.
So I would say that those facts and figures then aren't as up to date as we would need to take into account the additional builds that we've got currently in progress and the ones that are still to come over the next 12 to 24 months.
That would require our transport planning colleagues to have said there is a capacity problem. They haven't said that. So their expectation is that, based on their traffic information, with this additional store and with all the committed traffic that's already been allowed for and consented, they don't expect there to be a highway capacity problem on either Crow Hill Road or Eastborough Way.
After a fashion, I might not agree with those figures, but at least you've given an answer that they believe that there is capacity within the network. Whether I accept that is a separate issue, so at least we've got to... But if I look at paragraph 6.3 then, where you've got the data there about the 18,044 2021 estimate and 6,831 on Crow Hill Road, how then can you use that information to determine the actual vehicular movements, as it is in 6.4, going into and out of Raven Way?
Those numbers don't do that. They don't document how much is going in and out of Raven Way for everything that's there now. It is literally just for the new store. Doesn't include the pub, doesn't include the other retail at the back. So they are just the numbers for this development, because this planning application can only consider the impact of this site.
Again, that doesn't tell me. With respect, I understand that you're trying to give the information that you can, and I respect that to a point. But someone has had to make a judgment call that this is not a severe impact on the highway network. They must use information to base that judgment call on. From what I can see, Chair, there are assumptions built into this, but no data built into this because they're saying at 6.4, and they're giving it with some categorical assurance that there would be 78 two-way vehicular movement trips in an hour. So that's what 1.5 a minute going in and out, and up to 812 vehicular movements daily. And there's been some allowance for the developments going on in that neck of the woods, but from the sounds of it, not completely. So I have grave reservations about this, Chair, because it may not be, as it seems to point out, an overall impact on the highway network on Crow Hill Road and on Eastborough Way. But there is certainly, in my view, a great impact on Raven Way. And that is the entrance, and that's the only entrance and exit point into this site. To my mind, 812 extra a day is an awful lot. Now, I accept that there are industry reports, and it refers to this at 6.6, that they assume that 28% of the trips will be additional to the road network and the others will be passing by or on their way to school, on their way to work, whatever. But they may be on the highway network going anyway, but going into Raven Way, that is extra. At the moment, according to this, they wouldn't be going in there anyway. But they must be going in order to make this a viable business. So there must be an impact. So I personally feel, Chair, that the impact on Raven Way is severe, and also the argument that and this is going back to our SPD about the number of car parking spaces. Our SPD says that 16 spaces are required. There is a reason we put that in there in the SPD, Chair, and that is to ensure that we have enough spaces for that the buildings that go up require. Officers themselves have said that only 14 are given. That is a breach of our policy. The mitigation that we are given is it will be shared with the pub. To me, Chair, as someone who knows the area very well and lives in Whitestone, has lived there virtually all my life, that is not sufficient mitigation. That is a if, but, or maybe. If there is space there. What happens when you have the World Cup? What happens when, not that I watch the World Cup, as you can tell from my appearance, I'm not a particularly sporty person, but having worked in a pub, I know that when you get the big sporting events, when you get the big, as we've had, the coronation events and everything, people go down in their cars, they park up, and those two spaces, which there is, in inverted commas, an agreement, aren't there. But we cannot condition that. The whole point of planning conditions is to give some security to residents that things that will be done in the proper way. And that isn't being conditioned, Chair. So on those grounds, the breach of the SPD, and on the basis that I believe there is a severe impact on the junction with Raven Way, I will not support the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I've got several other speakers indicated. So at the moment, I've got Councillor Hammersley, Councillor Shires, and Councillor Markham. Was that Councillor Cates? I'll add you to this. So I'll move on to Councillor Hammersley as my next speaker. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, highways, you're not filling me with confidence with these figures and estimates, guesstimates, past history, etc., etc. And if you're not filling me with confidence, you're not filling these public people with confidence either, that these figures can be relied upon. So I'm taking the view, with your answers to Councillor Wilson, you were prevaricating with your answers and not giving him an answer. Extremely difficult for me on planning, ignoring other shops, I can't take those, and businesses. This is taken on its own individual site for this particular shop. I'm ignoring everything else, which I have to. But I've been there this evening. I need to see it, feel it, touch it, and get a feel for what the locals have to put up with daily. Without the shop being there, it was awkward getting in, awkward getting out, and now this was at 4:30 this evening. So it's works traffic, etc., etc. And even I had to stop for just a van coming and going. And on your figure 2B, the carriageway widths, I look at the pictures. This sort of it's representing vehicles. There's not a wing mirror on any of these vehicles, so they've probably had them all smashed off or whatever. I don't know, but you know, it's not showing me a true picture. So again, the turning circles that you have demonstrated for an Arctic on page, whichever page it is, after 6.9, I can only show you on the page. There's a page where it's a turning circle with a grey shaded area with a car parked at the side. That's on your drawing 54311. But then on the next page, 5431060, I think it is, there's another turning circle for an Arctic which shows something completely different. So again, this confusion there is, what is the correct turning cycle for a vehicle, an Arctic or whatever, going in? There's two pictures there of two examples. So again, it's throwing that element of doubt into my head And also, when the Arctics do turn into where the proposed shop will be, is there a turning circle in there for it to come back out forwards, or will it have to reverse back out? There probably is. I can't see it on these particular drawings. But again, we don't want an Arctic reversing out onto Raven Way. So there's lots of issues here, Chair, which I'm not happy with. I'm not happy with the answers given to Mr. Wilson. These figures, in my opinion, of the traffic flow are dated. We know in the area what's going on with houses being built, etc., etc. So I won't be supporting this either, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. My next speaker is Councillor Shires.
Hi, yeah, just wondering what number increase in traffic movement would be regarded as having a severe impact?
There is no numbers for severe. It's all about assessment and capacity. So if transport planning had said there was a capacity problem, we would have insisted that all the traffic numbers would have been modelled to look at the impacts. But they said there's no network capacity problem.
If there is no number by which to say something is severe, then you're unable to argue that it is not severe because you've got no number to actually argue against, surely.
In a perfect world, that would be exactly where we'd be. Unfortunately, it's not. In terms of severity, if transport planning colleagues said there was a congestion issue that couldn't accommodate this level of trips, we would have asked for extra modelling to be done so that we would have had data, base data, future proposed data to compare. But they said, no, this level of additional traffic could be accommodated on the network. So their engineering judgment, if you like, is it's not severe. And the inspector might take a different view, but in terms of engineers and transport planners, they've said no.
So basically the whole decision is flawed then, because what you're using estimated data from 5 years ago. You're adding a proportion that's potentially not in line with the current amount of house building. You haven't got a figure that says a certain amount of additional traffic would cause severe impact. And this is coming from just an engineer, and there's no top heavy. So that would be like somebody saying on a BMI, if you're at 13, for example, you are underweight, but there is no top weight to actually determine whether you are obese, clinically obese, etc. Therefore, you've got no way of of measuring whether somebody is, in effect, underweight or obese, or in this, of whether something has severe impact or doesn't have impact, because then that would no longer be objective. It would become subjective of what actually people think themselves. And if people think that 812 additional car movements per day is severe, then that stands at severe. And you can't argue any other way, because you've got no way of saying, well, actually, no, because in law, in statute, in anything regarded with regards planning, with regards appeals, with regards anything, that is what a judge has stated.
I think the only thing I'd say is that, firstly, the number of trips that are visiting this convenience store is going to be a local facility. It's going to be conducive to walking and cycling. The number of trips going here will not be additional. They will not be additional trips. They will be transferred, shared, existing, passed by.
I'm just going to make a point before you do, Councillor Shires, on this, and that is that I live in Bulkington. The nearest butchers to me is Crow Hills Butchers, for example. And so I go there. I go to Crow Hill Butchers and I use that facility. I drive. I don't walk. Okay, I'm a fat boy. I don't cycle either. Okay, so I go by my car. And the majority of residents in my village, so that's another 6,000 people, plus the fact that we've got two sites coming forward to development, potentially another, 800 houses, plus all the associated cars. You will have them to contend. We haven't even mentioned them. So it's actually kind of mounting the number, and the facilities that we have, we often sometimes share with surrounding villages. So, I have to go to Crow Hill Butchers. I'm sorry, Councillor, for jumping. felt I need to make that point that it does extend beyond to the wider environment.
I was just also going to give you a metric with regards to whether the impact was severe as well. The reason we've pulled together the DFT traffic data and we've undertaken this assessment, and we have done it robustly as well. We've assumed that all of the traffic is turning in one direction rather than dispersing in various directions. And we just applied it to the link, to that DFT link where we got those traffic flows. Now, from a traffic engineering perspective, they say that the daily fluctuation in traffic is around about 5%. So anything less than that is going to be imperceptible. You're not going to notice it. So in this regard, that assessment that was pulled together relatively quickly for this committee, it determined that the impact on Crow Hill Road would be 1% and on East Borough Way would be 3%. So therefore, that was to demonstrate that it would be less than the fluctuation in daily traffic and therefore it wouldn't be noticeable.
It's still flawed because you still can't say what would be severe and what wouldn't be severe. So you can say 1%, 2%, 3%. If it's actually regarded as severe to one person, it's severe. And you've got no numbers to say, well, actually, an increase of 1% is not regarded as severe. And additionally, all the figures that have been put forward by the DTU, by Warwickshire Transport, etc., are all outdated by 5 years. And yes, post-COVID, people are working from home, but that actually means they're visiting their local shops far more. So they're not travelling into town, they are going to their local shops. More people are driving. Most houses now have 2 to 4 cars. So you have young people who are 17, 18 getting cars, driving to the shops on the way home, because if anybody's got a teenager, they know how their legs don't work. You know, if you've got somebody such as me, who I've got 2 children, both of which have disability issues, even I'm just going to my mum's, which is a 15-minute walk, I have to drive because I have to take the kids, and if we go to the shop, we have to stop, and things like that. So actually, as far as I can see, the data that yourselves, the County Council, and that's been put forward by DTU is absolutely flawed. And until you can give us something that says an increase of X amount of traffic would be regarded as severe for X, Y, Z reasons, severe is subjective.
Just,
Sorry.
we would love a number that told us what severe was. MPPF doesn't and won't quantify it. It's going to be up to what an inspector decides is severe. And that's when we've got case law after case law, and that's the position we're in every time.
Councillor Shires, any more questions? No? Okay, I'll move to Councillor Markham next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just really to clarify with the highways. So what we're actually saying is this 78 two-way vehicle trips and the peak at 812 is specifically for these premises. So the other usage for the pub and what have you, I know it's nothing to do with this application, but that's not actually been taken into account. It would have been nice for us to be able to say this is that there's already 8,000 vehicles using that road, and now all of a sudden we're going to get 812 on top of that. So I think it would have been nice to see just exactly how much impact this would have made. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that at all?
I mean, like I said, we've pulled together the information that we had from DFT, and DFT doesn't have jurisdiction over Raven Way, so therefore we do not have those traffic flows available. The only thing I'd say at this point is that, you know, it's an existing local retail centre. There's an existing convenience store there. There's goods vehicles travelling up and down there. There's cars visiting a convenience store. If it was a problem, we would have been aware of it before.
I think you might be made aware of a problem right now if you hadn't sort of worked that one out. And I say, not trying to prejudge this, but you know, there's lots of things coming out now where you can see there's lots of concerns from various councillors. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, I was just going to say there might not be a problem now, but when you add 812 to it, there will be a problem.
Okay, Councillor Cape.
Sorry, it goes back to elaborating on a question that I asked earlier. In paragraph 3.4, it says that in your diagram 5431-11 demonstrates that vehicles will be able to give way or pass one another at convenient locations. But on the map, and actually having driven there and actually having seen the videos of it, there are no convenient locations. There are no ways for any vehicle on that road to pull in. They have to stop and quite often reverse back some distance. So how can you make that comment that vehicles will stop, give way at convenient locations when there don't appear to be any locations that are convenient?
I think what I'm referring to there is that on a straight section of the road where a vehicle is not undertaking a turn, that's where they would conveniently pass. So these goods vehicles are travelling in and out of the site at slow speeds. They're undertaking a relatively tight turn, so they will be travelling at slow speeds. And in doing so, they will negotiate with drivers, and that is just part of a course that people will give way to one another. Like I said, it's obviously an existing scenario that's occurred, and the traffic numbers will continue to be low.
Is that on? Semantics and language is important. So in the definition of the highway agency, is giving way reversing? It's not. It's two totally different manoeuvres. To give way, you stop or you pull over. To reverse back, you're changing direction. How can that be classed as giving way?
I mean, I can't comment on the videos. I don't know how valid they are.
Okay, so we didn't get a definition of give way as opposed to changing manoeuvre. Moving on to the map just before paragraph 6, where it shows the turning circles, etc. I believe that on that map there are some cycle stands designated, which again go against the SPD for the council, which says that the cycle stands should not be on pedestrian walkways. So not only is it contravening the SPD for the location of the cycle stands, but bearing in mind that HGV vehicles are going to be doing a tight turning curve into the delivery area, there is, in my mind, a potential danger to anybody in the process of parking their bikes or getting the bikes from there. And so for me, on road safety on that, and contravening the SPD, and the lack of clarity on whether reversing is considered to be safe on that road or not, I won't be supporting the motion either.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any other speakers who have not indicated they wish to speak, or who wish to speak on this matter? Councillor Smith.
It seems we've got the perennial problem of the experts looking at their plans and their projections, and the people on the ground who actually knows what happened there. We all see it, we all visit that centre, we know the reality of it, but we've got the same old dilemma that we've faced time after time on this committee, and that dilemma is, although we know there are highways issues, if highways don't actually object, this will get overturned at appeal. So my question is to the head of planning. I'm minding which way this is going at the moment from the comments that are made. If this application is refused, it will almost certainly be appealed. So are you able to commit in terms of what a defence might look like, and is there any chance that this could be won at appeal?
Can I just firstly answer probably the easier issue to do with supplementary planning documents? I totally get what members are saying, but I just warn you to be careful on any refusal on those grounds, because they are guidance only. They are not set in stone, and we've been held at that at appeal quite recently on a number of occasions. We've had 5 recent appeal decisions where we've been quite clearly told their guidance. So if it doesn't quite meet the standard, you know, we need to look at flexibility. And I'm just going to ask Karina just to explain the thing about cycle stands a little bit more as well, if you don't mind, Karina.
Yeah, just to jump in on the cycle stand issue, because we did have an objection in relation to that, and I think one of the councillors just picked that up. The path where the cycle stands are proposed is significantly wider than the main path on Ravens. Is it Raven Way? The leftover path beyond the cycle, the bicycle that would actually be parked in that location is in excess of 1.5 metres. The main path is around 1.6. So 1.5 is enough for somebody in a wheelchair, for example, or with a pushchair to get past. So I just sort of advise a bit of caution in terms of that specific element of the application, which, in my view, wouldn't substantiate any refusal.
Thank you. And I think obviously the other element that's been raised, and there's been obviously a very interesting debate about severe, obviously a term that was introduced into the National Planning Policy Framework some years ago now, that's given us all a headache because there is no set standard. It varies from location to location. Obviously, at the moment, your officers have got guidance, technical guidance, which basically says the impact of this development, and you must remember it is just about the impact of this development, would make the situation severe. And if we go down that route of refusing, we must have that evidence to counter what has been put forward by the technical experts here today. So it can't just be hearsay. It has got to be hard evidence. And just to sort of answer Councillor Smith's point, with your officers, professional officers, both at county level and district level, recommending approval, then we wouldn't be able to defend the appeal for you. So obviously, if you are going to refuse on severity grounds, you need to think carefully about how that evidence is going to be brought together, because as you will appreciate from the discussions today, it is difficult. I keep saying to you all, any decision we make is a planning, evidence-based decision. But you will know from things like the local plan, the borough plan review, it's not always evidence that's immediately up to date, because if it was the case, we just would never move forward. So we do always have to make some assumptions. So as I'm saying is, I know it's difficult. I probably, having been in planning 34 years, understand the sort of technical details. But at this point in time, I'm just worried about where we get that other evidence to say that the situation will be severe, but it must be based on this development only. And that's just what I need you to think about, members.
Councillor Hamsley.
Yes, thank you. On that point, we sort of all on this side of the chamber have sort of come to the agreement that this evidence produced for traffic vehicle numbers, etc., is flawed and out of date. So how can we, on this side, and help with the public up there, how can we prove which is the right figure to base this on? How can we have a survey done? How is it within our powers, which we have very little by the sound of it, that we can judge with up-to-date figures, 2023 figures, with what we know in the local area? We know exactly in the area what is being built and where it's being built, and its possible travel through the town. So again, it's very difficult for us to disprove what highways are telling us, because they're going on national surveys, etc., which is what they're basing their figures on. But we as locals know that that could, as has been said, be flawed with the actual truth. So we're in a grey area, proving or disproving the figures for vehicle movement in this area. So how can we do that? How can we have a survey done up to date with all these figures that we know from the housing that's going in the area? Thank you.
Yes, well, obviously that's not particularly an officer decision. It's one for members. You are quite entitled to commission, to see if you can commission your own work, to look at additional evidence, more up-to-date evidence. But obviously, again, you must bear in mind that this is probably tens of thousands of pounds worth of work, but that's not for an officer to make a decision on. All I'm saying is you would need at the moment, as your professional advisor, I am concerned that there is no sound evidence to discount what's before me in terms of the technical experts. You quite rightly can see if you can commission that work, but there is going to be a cost to the authority in doing that.
So, do we make a judgment on cost, or do we make a judgment on the truth?
I'd just like to reiterate some of the information that Highways and the Highways experts from the applicant side has already raised. In terms of the impact on the network, that's based on the floor area of this use class E building. So it's been determined to be 800 odd movements per day. The Highways engineer, has already said that impact is 1 to 3% on a worst case scenario, which is less than the fluctuation from a day to day in terms of traffic impact. So I think that's quite a key piece of information. That's based on worst case scenarios. So if we went to appeal on that basis, I think we'd be defending something where the information's already presented to us tonight and in the report submitted to support the application.
Sorry, do I have any other members who wish to speak? Councillor Smith.
Just to come back on my original question, which I haven't burrowed down into yet, in terms of what you've heard tonight, in your professional opinion, from both sides, if this is refused, and it will go to appeal, I'm pretty sure, has anything you've heard, and the lack of evidence from our perspective, give you any confidence in any defence whatsoever? Would you actually be able to defend? And if you can't defend, I'm assuming this would automatically be approved by the inspector, and what are the implications of that?
Yeah, I mean, the issue we have got here is that this is a development that you would usually find within a local centre, that you see up and down the country. You see the similar situations where it's happening. Again, only based on my experience across the country, is that I know through appeals in other areas, the local authorities haven't been successful. Now, as I've said, we as your professional officers will not be able to defend the appeal. If nobody defends the appeal, then it is likely that the appellant will be successful and we will get costs awarded against the council as well.
Councillor Shires.
Is there any point in even bringing these things in to planning? Because it just seems to be that even when we're pushed into a corner to say that we agree with something, and when we actually say, based on local knowledge, which is why we're elected, because we know the area, because we want to represent our residents, because they trust us, we then get a team of experts who don't know the area, who look at outdated figures, who can't give us correct baseline or severe impact data, and we have to go with that anyway, whatever actually lack of evidence that we feel that we don't have, because I am still not happy, and I know it's gone through case law. That doesn't make it correct. That is again somebody just passing the buck on to somebody else, that we haven't got or what would cause severe impact, because in some areas 881 movements, additional movements, would actually be quite severe. And based on the absolute horrendous traffic there is at the moment around the area, around the Nuneaton in general, it would just be horrific over just that 800 could actually do that. So is there any point in bringing it to planning?
I think that obviously you are wanting to make a decision. All I'm saying to you, and I know we've said this, is that you just need to have the evidence. And if you wanted to basically go against the evidence that you've got before us, you just need to think very carefully that we would have to get that evidence commissioned.
Councillor Cape.
It's a point of clarity, really, based on what Councillor Shires has just said and your reply. I remember back to the training that I did originally a year ago for this, and it reminds me a little bit of the Melian dialogue, which is that might is right, that effectively if you've got legal and officers who are saying, here is our professional opinion, then it is for us to weigh that up, and the consequences of it you've made quite clear. But I was also told that what we've got to be able to apply is reasonableness, that we've got to be able to say, am I, as an individual, happy that this is reasonable? And that if I decline or don't support this, am I behaving unreasonably or not? Because actually I don't think I am being unreasonable. So on one hand, you've got the balance between facts, experts, technical, and our role to be reasonable. So could you just kind of polish me up on the reasonableness again?
I don't really feel like I might be repeating myself a little bit. Totally get what you're saying, Councillor Cape, about being reasonable. And it's making that judgment based on reasonable evidence. And that's what you've got to weigh up again, going back to, is the evidence that you've got to counter the evidence that's before you from the applicant and your professional highways officers enough to make this a successful decision when the applicants go to appeal on it? Because obviously reasonableness is also one of the areas where the council will get costs. So you're quite right to bring it up, because if the applicant applies for costs, the inspectorate will look at whether the council has acted reasonably in their decisions as well.
Okay, Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you, Chair. We're put in these positions so that we do give due diligence to both sides, and then we form our opinion and what we see as feeling as being right. There is not good feeling with this in the chamber at the moment from lots of members, but having heard what I've just heard, if we vote against this, I then feel we're being left or put out on a limb and on our own, because it will not be, as we was told, be able to defend it. So where do we go again? Where do we go if we're not going to be defended by our own team of people? We're out on a limb. So it's difficult. But, you know, I can understand the head of the planning going with the decision from the professionals with the evidence put in front of us, but we're not happy with the evidence as councillors which is put, because of the reasons been said more than once. So if we say no, then I get the feeling, well, we're on our own. Get on with it.
Just to clarify, obviously with our recommendations tonight, we would do you no favours at appeal if we suddenly changed our minds at appeal. You would need somebody else to defend your case for you. Now, at this point in time, I can only give you an assumption how likely that's to be. Obviously, you are quite entitled, as mentioned, to go out to external consultants to get them to support you at the appeal. But we professionally can't. And as I say, we wouldn't do you any favours, because if I got in the witness box at examination, the first thing the inspector would say to me, well, what's changed your mind? So it's, you know, as I say, it's not that we don't want to, and certainly I've been at many appeals where I've had to help out where it's gone against officer recommendation, but I've not been able to basically do the work.
Yes, and I've fully understand your position, and that's why you're there, to help with our guidance. I fully understand. But it still didn't help us going against your decision with the evidence given to you and the advice given to you if we still disagree with it. Now, I'm not sure of the procedures here. If we, as councillors, if we're allowed to have a chat outside of chamber, what shall we do? You know, procedurally now, I get the feeling there's quite a few of us don't want this to go through, but we've now. You can correct me if I'm saying things out of turn, Chair, but we're being advised another way that you will stand up and say the facts before you say this should go through.
I mean, I think we've been down this road before, haven't we? Many times, as I think Councillor Shires alluded to, and so have several others. But it's up to us. But obviously, we need to be mindful of what the consequences will be if we go down a certain road. Now, I have heard sort of also Maria sort of saying, you know, do we want to commission somebody, you know, as a consultant to do that work? Now, I don't know whether that's in our power as a planning committee to actually do. But I mean, is that something that we would want to do in terms of defending this if we were to sort of, you know, go down the road of refusal and looking at getting our own consultants? But again, therein lies another cost to the public purse. So we have to be mindful of that, and you could still end up losing and then having to pay damages on top of that. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone here, whether it's yourself, Maria, or whether Wendy, our sort of legal expert, can sort of help sort of fill us in and tell us whether it's something we're entitled to do and you know, vote on, or whether that has to go through various other committees.
Chair, I'm not aware that it's been done before. I'd suggest perhaps if you want to go down that route, you might look to defer tonight and take advice on it.
Okay, so that could be an option then to defer. Councillor Wilson.
Chair, I'm trying to sit here as a planning councillor, but I cannot ignore the fact that I am also leader of the council with an overall responsibility for the budget and everything that goes with it. And it is my understanding that the decision or otherwise to commission a report is an executive function and not a committee function, and that would fall to Cabinet and the respective portfolio holder, depending on the level of expenditure, etc. So this is really on the horns of a dilemma, because my corporate and borough-wide responsibility is at odds with my ward responsibility. And I can assure every single person here present that it is not a very comfortable position to be in. The reality is that we do not have the budget to commission that. We've just been through a budgetary process in February where we had to find £3 million worth of savings just to balance the books for everything we had to do in year that we knew of. That's not including any other hiccup, speed bump, whatever you want to call it, that comes down the year, like we had with the Ukraine war and inflation that we all had to deal with as part of that. So I'm feeling, Chair, that I do have to give an element of caution as leader of the council here, bearing in mind the direction that the debate is moving in. I still believe I have to support my residents in this, and I will do that as a ward councillor. But I would be negligent, in my opinion, if I didn't stress that as leader of the council. There are also consequences. And I understand what Maria is saying. I understand everything that you've said, and that you have a professional obligation to maintain as well. So I also have to give that I have to be honest with the committee and members of the public about the capacity as leader of the council and the finances of the council. But I would stress, Chair, that I do find it strange that county highways have, and I accept it's not your element, it's someone else, but they've said that they don't believe there is an adverse impact on the network, which is why they didn't ask for all these reports to be done. When we did have the Heart of England application go through a number of years ago, there had to be serious mitigations put in place on East Borough Way in order for that application to be passed, which includes work to be done at Crow Hill East Borough Way Junction and indeed Highfield Road Junction as well, because of the way that that all flows through. So I have to say I am exceptionally disappointed in the highways team as a corporate. I'm not having to go at you as individuals. I'm disappointed in the process, because it seems to me, Chair, that the left hand and the right hand have not been talking on that front. And I suspect committee will have to make a decision it does not want to, because of the financial position and the reality of whether it goes to inspection or not, because that is a material consideration. And to respond to Councillor Shire's point, yes, there is a point in us being here, because sometimes actually officers have to make a judgment call themselves in whether it is acceptable in terms of the guidance, and we are, where it is more a subjective and an interpretive area, we are at liberty to disagree with officers, such as things like beauty and design, aesthetics, etc., etc., and pepper potting and all this, that and the other. But when it comes to cold, hard numbers, we are slightly more restricted. My problem with this, Chair, is fundamentally that, to me, that 812, in my mind, is severe and excessive. But I cannot judge that against something because no one has got that baseline to give me. Now, it may be that 812 is a piddly amount. I don't think it is. But unless I have something to judge it against, because it could be out of 1,000 trips already a day, or it could be out of 10,000 trips a day. I can't put it in context, Chair. As a ward member, I have to take that into account. As leader of the council, I do have to advise the committee of the budgetary position that goes with it. And I hope Wendy would accept that that is a reasonable argument to make.
Yeah, just see if Wendy has got any come back to what the leader of the council has got to say there.
No, Chair, nothing further.
Okay. Councillor Smith.
I'm in a similar position to Councillor Wilson as portfolio holder for planning. I think probably residents will guess that most of the committee are sided with them. We've all got experience of this. We totally disagree with the assumptions of highways. But I have to face the reality that if this is refused today, our only options, painted by officers, are to commission our own experts to come up with a different scenario. My guess is that will be a reasonable five-figure sum. We then have to face the inspector with whatever the outcomes of that are, and there's no guarantees they will come up with a different argument than we're currently presented with from highways. So having spent that five-figure sum, we're then going to lose an appeal. It will get approved anyway, and we probably will get another five-figure sum for losing that appeal in costs. I don't have the budget in my planning portfolio to pay all those costs. So I'm between a rock and a hard place here. My heart says, you know, I should be supporting the residents, and certainly as a ward councillor, were I their ward councillor, I would have to. But my planning head, as portfolio holder for planning, is telling me that to refuse this tonight is a bit futile because it's going to get approved anyway, and it's going to cost the council somewhere in the region of a reasonable five-figure sum, and I don't have the budget to pay for that.
Okay, thank you. I've got two further speakers. I'll go to first, though, which is Councillor Green, and that'll be followed by Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, I've got a question for the head of planning. Historically, when authorities have got their expert external committees and put it in front of an inspectorate appeal, I believe they tend to fail. They'll go with the original findings of highways. They won't. If we spent all this thousands of pounds on getting our own answer, that wouldn't hold any weight at an appeal. Historically, is that right?
I think it's a difficult one to answer because it is, my experience, it does vary. It does vary. But, you know, what you've listened to is that evidence is very much based on sort of national standards in how we do things. So my feeling is at the moment, I know you're concerned about the point in time when the information was originally done and how it was updated, but that is kind of the standard methodology. And my concern is if you then move away from the standard methodology through another consultant, that's sometimes where councils do fail because they try to use a different methodology. And although it's difficult, it is the methodology that's used up and down the country, unfortunately. I'm with you, it's not ideal, but going back to it, evidence will only ever be at a point in time. And if we kept on top of everything all the time, we just wouldn't, obviously nothing would get permitted, and this is why you will see inspectors going with this sort of standard methodology.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hammersley.
On that, highways would know what a survey would cost because they do it. That's their job. They would know. If we have an independent assessment, they would have to work surely to the same standards that highways already work to. I can't see the argument that they would work to a different standard. If it's BS 14,000, it's BS 14,000, or whatever the standard is, so that these figures can be arrived at and they are true fit and up-to-date figures. I don't know where we can go for someone to say, give me a quote for doing a survey in this area. I assume there are independent companies out there, but I'm also assuming they would all have to work to the same standard. Otherwise, it's futile, it's useless. You cannot have highways and independents working to two different standards. So, one, I would like to know what the cost would be, either or from highways or from an independent. And from that moment then, as costs go, we again could make a judgment. Do we pay X amount for this survey, independently or otherwise? Because these people at the back, I can feel they're getting itchy, that we're going to give a decision based on finance. So I would, because they may say to us, we will have a whip round and we'll pay for it ourselves. I don't know. I don't know. So I would like to know what a cost would be, and I don't agree with that highways and independents would come or use different standards. So that would be interesting for me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if Highways wants to come back on what Councillor Hammersley said or not. It's entirely your choice if you do or you don't.
On the actual cost, I'd have to go back to transport planning because we just don't commission them in development control. My guess, it depends on the type of survey that you're going to commission. Was it going to be a manual traffic count, an automatic count with tubes down on the roads for a couple of weeks? Those are the sorts of surveys I can imagine that you might get commissioned. But as to the cost, don't know any.
It varies significantly.
Yeah, Councillor Hammersley.
Locally to me in Bedworth, I've paid for my council money, I've paid for this type of survey. It cost a couple of £1,000, but this was for something else. This is not just assessing the traffic now. This is also to take into consideration the builds that we know are going on, which are going to add to it. So again, just having a count done with a man and a clicker is not the right thing for now. It needs to take in the whole picture.
Actually doing the surveys is probably the biggest cost element. The actual adding on of the additional housing growth is, it's not simple, but there are models that information can be extracted from, which transport planning rely on, and it's based on the local plan build-out trajectory for all of the sites within Nuneaton and anything else that's been committed. So every time that a planning decision goes through and is committed, they update their model information, or periodically update their modelling information so that it's all there.
Yeah, Councillor Hammersley.
Sorry to keep harping on then. I think this was asked earlier, is this modelling up to date, 2023?
No, the Nuneaton model has got a 2016 base and has been growthed up, and transport planning are in the process at the moment of renewing every paramix model they have for the county. It's probably about 10 or 11 models, so they're collecting new data now. DFT only said that they could collect new data post-pandemic in 2023, so they've done no data was allowed to be collected and used until this spring.
So again, we're relying on flawed data. We're trying to, and it has been said by nearly everyone.
I'm going to put a proposal now,
If you
because
could,
I
please.
feel we're kind of almost reaching some sort of an impasse at the moment. And my proposal would be, if someone wishes to propose and just to second it and put it to the vote, is that we defer the decision tonight. We go away and we find out what the true costings would be to commission such a survey, okay, and what sort of survey we would need to undertake so we can better understand what is expected, and also then look into what the feasibility of that being successful would be. And then we could come back at a later date. However, don't forget, the survey, if we did undertake one, would take time. And we've got to make sure that it doesn't drag on too long, because obviously then there's a determination factor. So we could go down a non-determination route if that then came out, and obviously the agents could apply for damages to be awarded from them. So there are some pitfalls if we kind of did go down that. But if you wanted to, I think it's within our powers and our gift to defer to look into it, and at least to say that we've found out, what we would need to do, because I think this has kind of caught everyone a little bit on the hoof tonight, and we don't have the full answer. So that is an option. I'm not saying it's the right option, but I'm proposing it there to you as members. Councillor Shires. You're saying, Councillor? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Cape was going to say something as well.
Before you were putting that as a proposal, there was just a point of clarity I needed, which might lead into that proposal. Listening to people that have been doing this for much longer than I have, and you mentioned left hand, right hand, and I think I picked up from across the road that the reason that something hadn't happened is that it hadn't been triggered by another department who had said this needs to be looked at. If that is the case, is there a reverse triggering that can be done? In other words, can we go back to that department who didn't originally...
Is that the department in Warwickshire County Council that you're talking about?
So what I'm saying is there a low-cost, in-house way of collecting data that would inform the decision, looking at it from a slightly different perspective, although still legally, without having to go to the extent and time of a full survey? That was the point of clarity I wanted.
Again, if you can answer that, it would be very helpful.
I guess partly that would depend on whether you'd be happy for us to use model data, or whether you actually want something that's reflective. You know, I mean, you use the term flawed. I wouldn't say it's flawed. It's the best model and tool that we've got at the moment, but it's whether or not you find that acceptable or not.
Yeah, the point was, is there a different modelling that can be requested that hasn't been requested yet?
There is modelling, well, there is the use of the Paramix model that could be carried out, but our transport planning team determined that the scale of this development didn't warrant it and that there wouldn't be a severe impact on the network as a result of it.
So going on to that, I might be belabouring it a little bit, but I'm trying to get to a solution rather than the problem, which is that although at that time they did not consider it warranted it, could a question be asked of them to justify why they didn't think it was warranted and to reconsider asking for that secondary modelling to be done?
I think the short answer is yes, but it would depend on whether the applicant was prepared to pay for the extra modelling that would be necessary to be done. Because transport planning, obviously, they're extremely busy updating local plans across the county. They won't have the time probably to do it. They will have to farm it out to somebody else.
Again, it goes back to somebody will have to pay for it, and it's a difficult one because it is likely to fall on the local authority because the local authority are asking for it. And I think realistically, we must think about the time this will take. You know, this survey work that comes in with applications, all the transport work takes months and months to compile. We see that when we get pre-apps in and how long it takes a pre-app to actually become an application. Now, they can appeal against non-determination. And that, you know, that is something that would be open to them. So I just want you to, again, just bear in mind, obviously we've talked about the cost, but there is also the time element here because this is not a quick piece of work.
So I'll put the proposal that I put to defer, first of all. And I know, Councillor Shives, if you're still happy to second that. So the proposal was to defer this so that we can actually find out the answer to these questions so we can make an informed decision at the next meeting. Councillor Wilson, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. This is going to be unpopular, I know. But I don't believe that is within the committee's remit. I really don't. That isn't the executive function. Now, whether you like the way things are set up...
Yeah, that wasn't my point, Councillor.
No,
it was. If I just clarify what I said, it was to look into what the options are. It wasn't to actually, for us, to reach a decision, because obviously if it's something we thought we would, we'd have to then recommend that and then sort of ask, obviously, the committee to look at. But I'm just wondering how the feasibility of it at the moment, that's all we're looking at, what would need to be done and what the costings of it are, just to find the background information to it. That's it. That's all I'm sort of proposing, not proposing anything else. That's the sole purpose of that deferment.
But Chair, if I can finish my point, even if the committee gets that information, it's then down to the Cabinet to make that decision whether to commission that work. There is, as I've explained, the financial implications of that, and we cannot ignore that we don't have the money that everyone seems to think we have in local government. We don't have it. Our budget only had a £3,000 surplus. If this is going to cost 5 figures plus, which it probably will, in fairness, I know I've heard people in the audience behind me saying, well, that's disgraceful, this, that, and the other. But whether you find it disgraceful or not, that is the cold, hard reality of what things are. You don't get something for nothing in this world. You have to pay for it. That will be 5 figures, and it's money that, I'll be honest, this authority just does not have without sacrificing some other service. That is the reality that we are facing. And also, there are other things to consider in this, Chair. Even if, and I'm not prejudicing myself here, even if Cabinet does go down the route that seems to be suggested, what happens if the report comes back the same? Then we'll have spent that money for nothing, and we'll have been no further forward. I suspect, although I think Maria can probably answer this, we're probably already out of time for determination anyway, or at least coming close to the clock on determination.
I was just going to add to your point once you'd finished, actually, that this window that we're discussing in terms of whether the money can be secured to even go down the route of a potential independent survey, it's highly likely that the applicant will do a non-determination appeal. So you'll also have additional grounds for unreasonableness, in my view, just to add to your point.
Thank you, Chair. I was coming on to the point of non-determination. If that happens, we lose all control on what happens with the application, including conditions or whatever. Or I don't think there are 106 contributions in here, but if that was to happen, then we would lose all control over that as well. It's a very dangerous precedent, in my view, to set, because what happens when it comes to another committee and another application? We can't keep finding all these 15, 20, 25,000s. Even if that's the route we go down, Chair, I think whilst it may be unpopular, we have to make a decision. My issue isn't with the actual data itself per se, it's the context it is within that data. Now, at some point we have to accept we're not going to get anything better and make our own decision on that basis. We have three options tonight, Chair. We either vote for, we vote against, or we abstain. I think we can't keep dragging this out.
Okay, thank you, Councillors. Councillor Condon, you can't come in on this debate. You're not a member of the Planning Application Committee. Okay. No, I'm sorry, Councillor Condon, but it's not going to happen. I'm afraid it's down to members of the Planning Application Committee. So, although I appreciate your enthusiasm to get involved, I can't allow that, because then that sets a really bad precedent for future meetings. Councillor Hammersley.
Just I'll sit on the other side of the bench this time. I'm sure the applicant would like to think he was doing the right thing in the right place for all the right reasons. I'm also sure that once this shop opens, he would like people to flock there and fill their pockets with money. But as it is, or appears at the moment, there's a bitter taste. And people may choose not to go to the shop because of all the reasons been stated tonight. So I can feel for the applicant, be on the applicant's side on this, but I'm sure he'd like to open the doors with balloons and banners, please come here and spend all your money. But the people will speak with their purses and their pockets and their wallets, and they may choose not to if it's leaving a bitter taste in their mouth. So again, for the applicant to think, am I doing the right thing in the right place for the right reasons? Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councillor Hamza. That's duly noted, I think, by all of us here today. So I did put forward, the idea of deferral. Okay, it has got a second, so I will go through that motion, Councillor Wilson, for all those in favour of deferring it to find out those extra costings. And that's all it would be. It would be just to find out the costings and the procedure that we would have to take and what we would have to do, and whether people like Warwickshire County Council could help us. That is all it would be. It would not be in any way, shape or form throwing the buck up to the Cabinet to do anything with it. It would just be for us to see whether we think it's viable or not. That is it. So all those in favour of that? Okay. Against? Okay, so that has been turned down. So in that case, I will now go, if I have no other speakers, I'll go to the substantive motion, which is to recommend and to grant planning permission subject to the conditions as printed. All those in favour of granting permission? So that's 5-4. Against? 3, and abstentions. Okay, so that has been approved. Okay, we'll just allow those who wish to leave to have a couple of minutes to exit. And then we'll resume the meeting. Okay, I'll propose a 2-minute comfort break just in case anybody needs to use the facilities, and then we'll resume in 2 minutes' time. Okay, could I ask members to resume their seats? We still have 4 agenda items that we need to cover. Yeah, sorry, Julian, about being a bit... Could I ask members, please, to resume their seats so we can continue with the other 4 items of business we have this evening? Thank you. Yeah, we do have other members of the public who have waited patiently, councillors. So, I don't want to delay them unnecessarily. They've been very patient with us so far. Okay, so we have all our councillors back in the chamber now, hopefully members of the public as well. So I will ask Corinne to now go on to our second item of the evening.
Thank you, Chair. Item 2 relates to land between 4 and 14 Chevron Road, Bedworth. The application is a full application for the erection of 8 dwellings comprising of 4 2-bedroom dwellings and 4 1-bedroom flats. The site comprises an L-shaped, fairly flat open area of land with no current use. It features grass, other soft landscaping to include trees, areas of hard standing and a small fence that borders the site. Formerly, the area was used as a children's playground, however, this use ceased over 2 decades ago. The site is located in a residential area. The application is brought to Planning Committee as the Borough Council of the applicant, and the application has received a level of objection which would also trigger the application to be heard at Planning Applications Committee. The key issues to consider in the assessment of the application are the principle of development, impact on residential amenity, visual amenity, highway safety and parking, flooding and drainage, impact upon ecology, biodiversity, trees and vegetation. With regard to the principle of development, the site is located within the settlement boundary of Bedworth, which is the secondary settlement in the borough. The site is designated as a non-strategic site allocated under policy DS5 of the borough plan. The site is allocated for up to 13 dwellings. This proposal is for 8 100% affordable dwellings, which is less than the maximum allocated for the site. Therefore, the principle of the development is acceptable and supported by the borough plan. Section 3 of the committee report discusses the residential amenity impacts of the scheme. The proposal would sit adjacent to existing properties to the north and east of the site, as well as to the end of rear garden areas of properties located to the south and west. The proposal is considered to accord with the guidance set out within the council's Sustainable Design and Construction SPD in respect to distance standards, and the 45 and 60 degree lines would not be breached. No unacceptable residential amenity impacts are considered to arise, subject to the imposition of a condition relating to obscure glazing and the removal of permitted development rights. In terms of visual amenity, the 2 blocks of development would be 2 stories in height. The site is in a corner plot and comprises a previously vacant site within the corner of the street scene. The built form proposed would loosely follow on from the 2 building lines featured adjacent to the north and east of the site. The design of the properties show that they are larger in footprint and scale than the existing properties within the street scene, and will project both in front of the existing front elevations and existing rear elevations by around 1 metre. The terrace properties would measure 7.6 metres to the ridgeline, and the flats would measure 8.2 metres to the ridgeline. This is consistent with the height of other properties in the area and will not look out of character within the street scene in terms of their height and scale. In terms of form, the use of gabled roofs would be in keeping with the street scene, as many of the properties also feature gabled roofs. With regard to materials, the application proposes facing brickwork for the walls and dark grey concrete roof tiles, which are both found within the existing street scene, and precise materials are recommended to be secured through the imposition of planning conditions. The landscaping features shown on the plans are indicative, and a condition is recommended to secure full hard and soft landscaping details via condition. Overall, the visual impacts of the scheme are considered to be acceptable. The site would be accessed from the existing highway, and the Highway Authority have requested that the scheme be accessed via a bell mouth, which is proposed to be secured via condition. The proposed amount of parking spaces would be acceptable to serve the scheme proposed. However, it should be noted that an alternative parking scheme is recommended to be secured via condition to address the parking dimension concerns raised in section 5 of the committee report. It should be noted that this alternative plan may result in a loss of parking spaces in order to allow the parking spaces to be of an appropriate dimension and to facilitate suitable turning within the courtyard. In any event, the revised parking scheme is unlikely to be significantly substandard in terms of parking spaces achieved on site to warrant a refusal of planning permission on this basis alone, and the application for the proposed alternative parking scheme would be considered again by the council during the course of an application to discharge that condition. The Highway Authority have not objected to the proposed development on grounds of highway safety or parking impacts, and considers that appropriate conditions could be imposed upon any permission granted to ensure suitable parking provision would be provided. The site is located within flood zone 1 and is not within an area impacted by a medium or high risk of surface water flooding. Subject to the imposition of a condition to secure an alternative disposal method for surface water, there are no concerns in relation to flood risk, surface water or drainage impacts. The site is located within an urban environment and consists primarily of amenity grassland, hard standing and hedgerows. A desktop survey, habitat survey and tree assessment have been submitted to support the application. There are no concerns relating to protected species. The scheme would result in a biodiversity net loss. However, given the minor scale of the scheme, which is less than 10 units, there is no mechanism to secure offsetting payments under a Section 106 legal agreement. However, both the applicant and the council's parks team have agreed to the undertaking of offsetting payments, which is deemed to be acceptable and positive, even if not required for other applications of this size. The scheme will result in tree losses on site, to include the loss of a Category B tree. Whilst the losses are regrettable, the retention of trees proposed to be felled would result in compatibility issues and pressure for severe pruning or felling in the future, which is not desirable. The council's tree officer has not objected to the proposal, and it is recommended that a condition be imposed upon any permission granted to secure the recommendations set out within the submitted arboricultural report. The proposal is recommended for approval, subject to conditions as set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have a number of speakers on this one, so I'm going to go to our two objectors first. I'll start with Mr. Harris. So, Mr. Harris, so you have 3 minutes, Mr. Harris, when you are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our objection from Chevron Road are the block of flats. We in Chevron Road, if you were to build 6 houses instead of 4 flats and 4 houses, we would accept this gratefully. The reason for this is we have a block of flats right opposite where you want to build the new flats. Over the last 20 years, we have suffered drug dealing, drug parties, prostitution, all-night parties. This is not just at this block of flats, but others of the same. The council in the past have had to evict people from these flats on 2 occasions. I have gone to court as a witness for the council to explain to the judge in great details what has taken on in these flats and other flats, and we are concerned that by building another block of flats, this will aggravate the situation. I have had to explain this to you as I have been threatened with violence. Many times I've had a knife pushed to my throat because I have been a witness to these for the council, and I wish the council to not build the flats on the behalf of Chevron Road. We have had to put up with this behaviour and are still having to do so. Over the last few years, the amount of broken windows that have been smashed in these flats. I have given the council information and details about the above problems many times, as with the police, when they have visited my house, but they do not seem to want to take any action about these problems, and we are greatly concerned that building more flats will aggravate. Please build the 6 houses which the residents of Chevron Road will gladly invite, and if you build these 6 houses for the young families to join our community in Chevron Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. I also have Mrs. Lowe, who's also speaking objection. So, Mrs. Lowe, when you are ready, you have your 3 minutes.
I've agreed to speak for Mrs. Alexander, who came but has had to go home because she's clearly unwell. I would have liked to have spoken for myself, but obviously only 2 speakers are allowed. If there's time, I'll just add a couple of comments of my own. So my name is Mrs. Lowe, and I live at number 19 Chevron Road, and I've lived there for some 35 years. I also served the committee by being employed at the local school for some 35 years, so know the area, the parents, the children very, very well. Mrs. Alexander's statement reads as follows. I am concerned about the noise and the aftermath if these proposed plans as outlined go ahead, especially with 4 gardens immediately at the side of my back area. The gap between my property and the build will be approximately 1 metre wide. This will become an alleyway like the one at the top of Tulliver Road and Mount Pleasant, except that mine will go nowhere. Youths and kids will gather and do their own thing. My privacy will be encroached upon immensely. I have first raised concerns at the first meetings last year with doors and windows facing me at the side. I was told by Lynn Joy from the council and the attending architect that the windows could be taken out. Since then, however, I've had a visit from Keith Earp and Lynn Joy from the council saying that the windows would remain but be obscured glass. However, tenants would not be able to open these windows due to their height without them standing on the sink. Parking in the road is horrendous now, especially at school times. It will only become much worse with the proposed new site. I've had issues with the trees on the proposed site due to the unkempt undergrowth, etc., and I've raised this on numerous occasions, always being told that due to wildlife and nesting, they could not be trimmed and cut back. However, in July 2022, I received an email from Darren Williams, the tree officer for the council, saying that they would be cut down to ground level. However, now since proposals to build, I have learnt that the trees won't be removed as they are too established, deep-rooted and overgrown. I would like to heavily stress that I do not have a problem with the council building. It is what the council intend to build, i.e. flats. Houses are more suitable for this site. I have had previous upsets and worry with the flats and some tenants opposite me. On one occasion, health and safety sat in my front bedroom to gather evidence, including an overnight stay. These tenants were eventually evicted. However, there are still antisocial issues that remain here. For myself, Chairman, I would just like to say, with the limited time left, that I don't have an issue with family homes being built at all. The issue has always been the flats, and the architect and Lynn Joy asked me at the meeting, and I said the same to them. The road is a nice little community and has had come full circle over the years, with several new families with children and grandchildren living here now. We have plenty of flats on our own front and back doorsteps. We don't need any more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Lowe. Can I just ask if any members of the committee have any points of clarification for either Mr. Harris or Mrs. Lowe at all they'd like to seek? No? Okay, in that case, I'll go to our next speaker, which is Councillor Martin Walsh. Someone's got, you've not got your microphone on.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Fellow councillors, I've lived in my ward since 1985 with my wife and family. And even though having recently moved, we still live in the ward. In actual fact, we live in the Mount Pleasant area of the ward. Given that, I think I can say that I have a greater insight and understanding of the local residents and the housing needs in the area, with all due respect to the council officers, even more since becoming the ward councillor. I attended both public meetings at Raceleys Junior School last year and spoke with numerous local residents. There were some who did not want the development to take place at all. But in the main, they were more than happy that that take place. There was also other concerns that were raised. But the main issue, as already stated by my two fellow residents here, the main issue is the building of the flats and not blocks, not 6 houses as such. This is also agreed by my fellow councillor, Councillor Evans. Whilst at the meeting, I asked the architect, was it possible to change the block of flats to two bedroom houses, knowing that it was quite easy because obviously it's CAD drawings these days. His response that it would not be difficult. I also spoke to one of the council officers regarding the flats, and the response was that there was a better site for them as opposed to Chevron Road. In a recent I seen a report commissioned by this council there was a greater need for two-bedroom social houses in the borough than one bedroom. In particular, 35% of two bedrooms, but only 25% requirements for one bedrooms. In a recent speech by Michael Gove, Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, he stated, new developments must have the support of local communities and they must enhance the environment and create proper neighbourhoods. Mount Pleasant area has already a high density of flats and masonettes, and Chevron Road is primarily family housing, a mix of social and private. Behind the proposed development in Mount Pleasant Road, there are bungalows, occupied mainly by elderly residents. The building of the flats does not have the support of the local community. It will not enhance the environment and create a better neighbourhood, and will not truly meet the needs of the local housing needs. If the council officer had listened to the local residents and myself at the public meetings, then the main objections would not be raised. Or were those public meetings only there just as a box-ticking exercise? So, when considering this application, I hope the committee will take into account the views of the local residents, myself, and the area, and propose changing the block of 4 one-bedroom flats to 2 two-bedroom houses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Could you just turn your microphone on, please?
Indeed.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any points of clarification they'd like from Councillor Walsh? No? Okay, in that case, I will move to our next speaker. So we've now got Mr. Osafo, no, we've got Mr. Madison, who is from GSS Architecture.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Josh. I'm the project architect on the scheme. I'm here to support the planning application for the construction of 8 new dwellings on Chevron Road and the dedicated amenity space for each dwelling. In terms of the proposed scheme, the architecture is in keeping with the surrounding area. The development has been designed to fit in seamlessly with the existing buildings in the neighbourhood. Importantly, the development constitutes the use of existing scarce resource by utilising a currently unused brownfield site and the surrounding infrastructure and services. The number of additional dwellings being proposed, we feel, will not cause a significant disruption to the local community. I would like to highlight the benefit that the proposed development will bring to the area. The development will provide much needed housing for the local community. The shortage of affordable housing is a pressing issue in many areas, and Bedworth is no exception. The addition of these 8 dwellings is aimed at addressing this issue, providing high quality, well-designed homes for families and individuals in need. The development will also create local jobs, both during construction phase and in the longer term. I'd also like to emphasise the strategic location of the site. The infill corner site, which has always been intended for residential use, is easily accessible by public transportation and is close to local amenities, including shops, schools and parks. The proposed development will provide residents with easy access to these amenities, enhancing their quality of life and promoting growth and development of the local community. Finally, I would like to point out the proposed development has been carefully considered and designed to benefit everyone in the community. We, as the architects, have taken into account the concerns of the local community by undertaking multiple public consultations and have worked hard to create a development that will have a positive impact for everyone in the area. The scheme has no objections from any statutory consultee, and we have worked closely with the local council and their consultants to provide a robust and well-considered scheme. In conclusion, we strongly believe that the proposed development of 8 dwellings on the Brownfield Corner site in Bedworth will be a value addition to the community. The design of the buildings is in keeping with the surrounding area, and the development will provide much-needed houses for the local community, create jobs, and have a positive impact on the local community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madison. Could I just ask, does any member have any points of clarification they wish to seek from Mr. Madison? No? Okay, so we'll go then to Mr. Byrne, who's speaking on behalf of the Nuneaton Bedworth Borough Council.
Thank you, Chair, and members for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of the development. I'm speaking on behalf of my colleague Jane Grant, who's the Council's Head of Strategic Housing, who unfortunately isn't able to attend the meeting this evening. Members may already be aware that there have been unprecedented numbers of people in housing need in the borough. There are over 3,000 households on the Council's waiting list, and as at today, while 95 are occupying emergency temporary homeless accommodation. This is not a situation peculiar to Nuneaton and Bedworth. The challenge of access to affordable housing is a national issue. By far the greatest need in our borough is for one-bedroom dwellings, followed by two-bedroom dwellings. In fact, 45% of all applicants are for one beds. Now, to put that in perspective, you've got 3,087 on the applicants for housing. 1,458 are one beds. 985 are for two beds. These are official figures. In relation to the concerns that may have risen regarding potential antisocial behaviour from new tenants moving into a settled community, I can advise members that we adopt a local letting plan for all new build developments. This means that of 8 units being proposed, 4 go to the existing tenants, 2 to homeless households, and the remaining 2 applicants for bands from bands 1, 2 and 3. The local letting plan was adopted a few years ago to enable sustainable communities by having a mix of experienced tenants among new tenants. In order to assist the council's development team in relation to the concerns around antisocial behaviour raised, research was conducted from our antisocial behaviour data, which demonstrated that the greatest prevalence of antisocial behaviour came from family homes and not one-bedroom flats, which it seems is a perception by some residents. The facts do not show that this could be the case. So in conclusion, the application is fully supported by the Council's Head of Strategic Housing, and I hope the members are able to support it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Do any members need any points of clarification clearing up? No? Okay. Before I move to the proposal and the recommendation, I would like to move that we suspend standing orders so that we can finish tonight's business. So I'm happy to move that from the chair. Are you happy to second that, Councillor Smith? All those in favour of suspending standing orders? Yeah, okay, so that's unanimous. Okay, so we will get through tonight's business. So before us then, we've got a recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. So do I have a proposer and a seconder so we can move to the discussion? So Councillor Wilson, if you're happy to propose, Councillor Smith as a seconder. Okay, I'll open it up to the floor then for any members. Councillor Hammersley.
Could I just ask our members over there, any of you live in the area? Okay, so you live in Nuneaton, so you're not familiar with the area? Okay, but you don't live there? Right, these people over here, I'm a local as well, we live in the area. We know what goes on. We know the ASB that goes on. We know the drug taking, the dirt bikes that wheelie round the street. We know because we live there. So listen to these people, they're willing to compromise. They are willing to have 6 properties, 3 semi-detached and not. There is, with these flats, etc., which have been the Mount Pleasant flats, there have been a bone of contention all around the Mount Pleasant estate with the ne'er-do-wells, we'll call them, okay, for some time, with drug taking, etc., and this is just round the corner. This patch of land was a problem with people coming and abusing the swings, the drugs, the needles which were left, etc., So it's fantastic that the council want to clear it and want to put properties up, but not at the cost of attracting the wrong people. I know we've just quoted figures, where 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms, etc. But these locals don't want, just for the sake of the number crunch of more dwellings, to just make those numbers up for the... We all know we need more houses all over the place, but we know. But they are worried and concerned, have they spoken tonight, that more flats, they already have flats on the doorstep, which are a problem. It's difficult to say, well, these won't be a problem, but can we be sure? But they are willing to compromise with 3 semis, which would make 6 dwellings and not 8. For the locals, they are happy with that, and I'm happy to go along with the locals because I know in the area it's a troublesome area, and these are willing to have a compromise. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Okay, Councillor Shires.
Thank you. The current flats, do we know the percentage that are families or who are single occupants, please?
I don't have that information today. Unfortunately, the head of strategic housing just wasn't available for this committee. I just don't have access to that information. What I will say in response to Councillor Walsh's speech is that following the consultation, which we took very seriously, and that was the whole reason for us doing it, I took back residents' concerns about the makeup of the properties, and it was absolutely clear from our head of strategic housing and broader housing colleagues that the need that we have is those mix of dwellings. We absolutely need these 4 one-bedroom properties. So we took the consultation very, very seriously. And as I say, I took that information back, but the decision was that we were going to stick with the 4 one-bedroom properties because that's what we needed. And as my colleague has pointed out, the data just does not support that people in one-bedroom flats create the most antisocial behaviour. And I guess the other point that I would make is, you know, I have spoken to all of the people that are sitting here in front of you at numerous occasions, and what I would say is that we do take antisocial behaviour very seriously. We've evicted 2 tenants from the very flats that are being spoken about, and that is not an easy process, and it's not a quick process. So what I would say is that we would take it seriously, and I encourage any of the tenants to speak to us about it. My team will be on site once the properties have built for 12 months. We will be continually going back to those properties, and I can assure you if we have any problems or any problems are raised, then we will be dealing with it accordingly.
Thank you for that. What I want to say that from my experience of my ward, Camp Hill, and a lot of the flats, we have massive, and I mean huge amounts of antisocial behaviour. We have the motorcycles, we have the drug taking, we've constantly got police there. Every time it's from families. And that is resulting from, unfortunately, the older young people influencing the younger children, and starting to sort of, they come together, hang around in houses, various things. And we have found that in probably all of our flats, and from what I've heard from other new developments in the more affluent areas, actually the issues are coming from where it's families as opposed to single occupancies. I know a lot of people, again on Camp Hill, who are living in a single 1-bedroom property, particularly the ones at the top of Ramsden Avenue. So they are all 1-bedroom properties, and we have no issues at all. They're Bromford and I never get any issues at all from Bromford with regarding those. And I know this isn't, but I am just going to say that from my experience of the ward that I represent, actually, I would be more concerned if somebody said to me, we're going to be building family housing behind you, because as opposed to we're going to have 1-bedroom flats, because and also with eviction, I'd be guessing it'd be easier to evict a single person than a family. And we are struggling at the moment due to things that need to be in place to ensure that we're supporting people effectively before they can be evicted. And that doesn't make wonders for you, but I am speaking from experience of what we're facing now, and from when I worked Citizens Advice, we always found that the ASB issues were unfortunately coming from families. And we're also noting it, I'm a governor at Camp Hill School, and we've noted that in the flats that I'm talking about, the issue is becoming widespread as we have one family and they're bringing in the children from other families, and then it's becoming far more widespread across the block. But actually where we have our one occupancy flats, there's no issues at all, absolutely none. So that's all I can, put forward to try and put some sort of ease for you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Karina Duncan, one of our planning officers, would like to come in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to follow on from that comment, I think one of the councillors mentioned the need for more 2-beds than 1-beds to support the applicant. We have had a headner published in 2022 that says that there's a 37% need for 1-beds and a 33% need for 2-beds. Of 409 dwellings needed per annum, 407 of those need to be affordable. So that gives you sort of some kind of context as to how important the tenure mix is really on this scheme. I'd also just advise that getting too deep into ASB issues without the hard evidence is a little bit of a rocky topic to discuss. I think we need to sort of stick to the facts. And a scheme with 1-bed units is a legitimate proposal, and we need to just assess it on the basis of its merits. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to actually add to that. I think we just need to, and I appreciate where you're coming from, Councillor. I know that's born from experience, etc. I don't want to denigrate that at all. But we need to make sure that we're sticking to material facts this evening. I know it's difficult, as we saw with our previous case. Emotion does come into it. I've now got Councillor Wilson, followed by Councillor Cape.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by actually thanking Mr. Harris for actually, I know it's difficult to stand up against these people and go to court. I work in the court service, I'm the court manager, it's all declared, so I should actually highlight, seeing that antisocial behaviour and injunctions and evictions and all that's been raised, my declarations are on file. So I do know how difficult it is, and I know how challenging the eviction process is, because I manage it day in, day out. But the chair and the presenting officer are correct. The antisocial behaviour in and of itself is not a reason for refusal. There's no objection here from the police on the grounds that it's poorly designed and would lead to antisocial behaviour, because we do have to have the design that goes with it to try and design that out. But I have to say, painting all people in flats, or it could be perceived by people watching that painting everyone in flats as being the generators of antisocial behaviour is completely incorrect. Antisocial behaviour happens no matter what type of house, no matter where it is. You get antisocial behaviour from Camp Hill to Whitestone to Slough, everywhere. It's not necessarily about the tenure of the property, it genuinely is about the person. And there are a number of people in our flats who are in 1-bedroom flats, whether they be ours or otherwise, who lead perfectly law-abiding lives and don't bother anyone. It does sound like you've had a particularly difficult issue, but I don't think you can draw one conclusion from an unfortunate set of circumstances in the area. I don't think that is legitimate or fair. Also, we have to bear in mind that I can't pass an application I would like I have to consider an application that's before me. Whether I want 6 houses or not is immaterial. It's what is proposed. I can't change that application. There are no grounds before me to object before an inspector that would be upheld. And we had that debate at great length before, Chair, that would do that. We also have to bear in mind that this is already established as a site of non-strategic importance through the borough plan. And in actual fact, it could have been far worse, because there could have been 13 houses on there. As we saw from the presentation, it had for up to 13. We've got 8 here. So I think you do have to take everything into perspective, Chair. Now, the design is no better or any worse than things that we've passed in the past. I think the residents have set a challenge to us in a policy issue about the antisocial behaviour, and I think the officers take that on board. And I do know that we have been beefing up the antisocial behaviour team, and a number of antisocial behaviour injunctions have been issued, quite a lot actually, over the past 6 months. But in terms of planning and sticking to all the bits that we have to judge it by, there isn't anything there to go off of in terms of refusal. And I think we have to be careful about confusing the borough-wide need of the 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 bed versus whatever, compared to what is actually on our housing list. Because actually we do have a lot of single people who do struggle to actually afford a property of their own, who do need to look at social housing. And there is a need for that. And we do know as well, actually, that because there hasn't been as much development in Bedworth, we have homeless people from Bedworth who are having to be housed in Nuneaton or even further afield, perhaps even over the A5 in Tamworth, etc., where we've had to put them up in B&B, because there isn't the new supply of housing coming forward in Bedworth. And actually, it's better for those people to be in their existing communities that they know and have the support and can get all those daily functions going. Even something as simple as taking the kids to school. It can be really disruptive, actually, having a homeless family housed in Tamworth when the kids actually are based in Bedworth. And that is a massive challenge for the families who are already going through great extreme hardship. So I think we also we have to weigh all this in the round. I don't think there is an objection which we could substantiate before the inspector. As I say, I do feel for the residents. I completely get that, because I understand what you go through, but I have to look at this as a whole, and I will be supporting the application, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Cape.
Actually, Councillor Wilson has addressed some points of clarity for me, which have kind of swayed me a little bit, but I'm still going to say and ask what I was going to ask anyway. All be that said, I understand that I can't vote against an application in preference to one that I wish had been made. But I would like to raise the point that there is a part of perception and expectation management. And for the residents involved, and indeed for the local councillors involved, I'm just a little bit saddened that despite those recommendations going to grown-ups higher up than me, who have said, no, you're doing this, we're now faced with a situation where we're going to disappoint a lot of people because there's nothing else we can do. I would have much preferred if we could have listened to it as a council and put, there's one of my colleagues who loves to say, you know, you get the right tree in the right place. Perhaps we could have put the right houses in the right place rather than sticking in a few extra flats, which percentage-wise are not going to make that much difference. And the expectation management and support of the local population would have been far greater. And it kind of saddens me that we didn't do that.
Thank you, Councillor Cape. Any other members wish to speak on this matter? No? Okay, in that case, we will go to the vote. Okay, so the recommendation before us is to recommend and to grant planning permission subject to the conditions as printed. So all those in favour of granting permission? Okay, against? And abstentions? Okay, so that is carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll just pause for a moment just to allow anyone who wishes to leave now to do so before we start our third item. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now move on to our third item. So, Karina, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Item 3 relates to an application for the reserved matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping relating to the erection of a food hall at Plot 1A and a building at Plot 2 comprising flexible Class E space on the ground floor and residential development of 30 dwellings. The site is located at the ex-Co-op Buildings and Car Park site on Abbey Street, Nuneaton. This application is being reported to committee as it is a major application involving council-owned land. The key issues to consider in the assessment of the application are the principle of the development, housing need and affordable housing, visual and residential amenity, highway safety and accessibility, flood risk, drainage, heritage and archaeology. The principle of development has already been established through the approval of the Outline Planning Permission. The Outline Planning Permission parameters indicate that Plot 1A is to be used as a flexible space of between 1,055 and 1,500 square metres for Class E use, and that Plot 2 at between 2,580 square metres and 5,200 square metres will feature Class E uses at ground floor level and residential to the upper floors. This application aligns with the approved parameters on the Outline Permission, and therefore the principle of the development is considered to be acceptable. Policy H2 of the Borough Plan requires 25% of all new developments to be affordable on sites of 15 dwellings or more. A total of 8 units are to be provided as affordable, which complies with this requirement. The Council's housing team have no objection to the application. With regard to visual amenity, Section 3 of the committee report discusses the design and visual impacts of the scheme. Plot 1A is designed to a scale which is reflective of the commercial nature of the area, with a traditional warehouse form at a 2-storey height, featuring a roof with 4 pitch sections, with the western section being set back from the southern elevation of the remainder. The overall scale of Plot 1A is also considered to be acceptable. The food hall building has been designed to provide an open frontage onto the proposed public plaza, and the pitch roof reflects the design of the existing warehouse to the east. The use of recessed terracing to the upper floor further enhances this and will ensure that the food hall becomes an attractive, vibrant venue in the town centre. Materials consist of metallic aluminium, galvanised steel and charcoal brick, which are considered to be acceptable. The maximum height is 14.5 metres over 4 storeys, and both parapet levels and plant overturn levels are well within the outline parameters. This is in keeping with the existing surrounding buildings. The building follows the curvature of Abbey Street, which is also in keeping with the proposed college building. Overall, the scheme is considered to be acceptable when having regard to visual amenity impacts. With regard to residential amenity, initial concerns regarding overlooking would be addressed through the non-material amendment application, which has been submitted to amend the proposed windows to obscure glazing at the adjacent college building to mitigate loss of privacy impacts. That relates to item 5 of tonight's agenda. Conditions imposed upon the outline plan of permission secure a noise assessment and noise attenuation scheme, including glazing and ventilation details. In terms of the nationally described space standards, all of the apartments complied with these standards. Overall, there are no concerns relating to residential amenity. With regard to highway safety and accessibility, the Highway Authority initially raised concerns in relation to the lack of parking provision without the proposed multi-storey car park, which formed part of the outline permission being built. However, there is a condition imposed upon the outline permission that requires details of parking provision to be provided for each phase. Details will be provided to discharge this condition prior to the commencement of the development. Car parking will be provided within the multi-storey car park as per the approved outline permission and as required by that condition. Overall, the Highway Authority is satisfied and no objections are raised to the application on highway safety grounds. The principles agreed at the outline application stage have been carried through to this reserve matters application, and surface water drainage from these specific plots will outfall into the wider Abbey Street development. The County Council's flood risk management team have been consulted and they raise no objection to the application. The proposal adjoins the Nuneaton Town Centre Conservation Area. The site, in particular Plot 2, immediately adjoins the conservation area and so will have an impact on the setting of this heritage asset. Although it would be taller than the surrounding buildings, it is considered that the proposed design reduces the impact on the conservation area. The third floor of the building would be set back and would be rendered to visually break up the massing of the building. The simple, contemporary and ordered elevations of the building with use of red brick materials would resonate with the character of Abbey Street, the proposed college building and the prevailing materials found elsewhere within the conservation area. Despite this, it is considered that the proposal will still lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of the conservation area. In terms of economic benefits, the proposal represents a major driver for investment in the future, which would contribute to improving the overall vibrancy of the town. It would also bring social benefits, such as much needed housing in a sustainable location. It is therefore considered that the harm identified to the conservation area would be outweighed by the public benefits referred to above. In relation to archaeology, the county archaeology team have been consulted and have no comments to make on this reserve matters application. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out within the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we have a recommendation to approve. We did have one speaker on this item, that was Councillor Condacor, but he's actually gone. In fact, he wanted to speak on the next three items, so items 3, 4 and 5. So the fact that he's not here, we will now proceed straight to the debate. So could I have a proposer and a second? So Councillor Markham and Councillor Shiers, thank you. I will now open the floor to any members. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the northeast elevation then, on page 77 of our book, that's showing the steel cladding type material, and on page 78 as well.
Sorry, yes, that's correct. Yeah, pages 77 and 78 show the sort of industrial looking building, and that would be the cladding, yeah.
Oh, this is only personal choice. It looks like a factory. It looks like a factory that I used to work in, and I'm sure we could have done something better than this, but it's only my choice. I haven't got to live in it. I won't go against it, but it's not the prettiest thing I've seen in the design of buildings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Do I have any other speakers on this matter?
Chair.
Yeah, sorry.
Just to clarify, that is the food hall element to this proposal, not the residential that you're referring to.
Thank God for that. Thank you.
If you wanted to have a look at the residential, if you turn to page 81, that will show those units.
Yep, a vast improvement on a warehouse-looking place, yes. Thank you.
You've obviously been on the Prince Charles School of Carbuncles and Planning, haven't you? Okay, so yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Cape, you wish to come in?
It was just to kind of support Councillor Hammersley, because at first sight, looking at it, it does look quite ugly. But there again, I suppose the benefit is they could call it the food factory.
Thank you, Councillor Cape. Okay, do I have any other members who wish to speak on this? No? So, I mean, for me personally, I'm delighted this has come before us this evening. It looks like a vibrant development, something that has been long sought after, I think, and much needed within the community. So, I for one would welcome this, and I think yes, there is that kind of industrial cladding on one side, but I mean, does that not fit in with the heritage of the borough to an extent, and then obviously a much softer appearance of the housing? But certainly in terms of the opportunity that this is going to afford, and hopefully the kickstart that we want for our borough, this is sort of will go hopefully a very long way towards achieve that. So I'll be delighted to support this evening. So as we have no other members who wish to speak, I'm going to go straight to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, so that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we'll move on to our next item. Karina, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4 relates to a non-material amendment to planning application 037658 to seek amendments to the vertical parameters to plots 4, 5 and 6. A number of parameter plans were submitted and approved as part of the outline planning application. These set out the minimum and maximum deviations for external parameters and the proposed buildings against which reserve matters will be made. The revised parameters propose to provide additional flexibility and reflect the requirements for these plots now that detailed design requirements are known. For plot 4, the proposed layout of the multi-storey car park will require lift overruns in different locations than previously envisaged. The vertical parameters of the building will not change, and the only change proposed is the reorientation of 2 lift overruns as shown on the parameters plan. In terms of plots 5 and 6, the amendments seek a slight vertical parameter reduction. For plot 5, there is no proposed change to the maximum height, but a reduction in the minimum height of 3.5 metres. For plot 6, there is no proposed change to the maximum height, but a reduction in the minimum height of 3 metres. It's not considered that the siting, general massing and scale would be materially different to that already approved. It is therefore considered that the proposals are non-material and would be acceptable. Planning Committee is recommended to confirm that the proposed amendments are acceptable as an amendment to the original planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I do have one speaker on this. So, Councillor Constable, we are on item number 4 of the agenda. I don't know if you're aware, we've just done number 3, so that's number 4. So, do you still wish to speak on the item? Yeah, you do have your 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, I've been to the pub because you were going on a bit.
I'll just clarify, Councillor Constable. A, I wasn't going on a bit, and secondly, we were giving something due diligence that it deserved. That's not going on a bit. There is a considerable difference, and I do take umbrage at your choice of words.
Anyway, I was talking about the process rather than any particular individual. On this application, obviously we keep moving things around with the levels and the sizing of all these plots, and I'm most concerned about ground levels. We keep getting these diagrams saying all these rectangles, plot 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, moving around. And when you get plans like the one we got for the drainage, we see there's quite a lot of slopes and issues on the site which are not being sort of clarified. And I'd like, with this application and all the other ones, to have a nice diagram of the ground levels, because in the drainage plan, and we're now talking about moving buildings up and down a bit and left and right a bit, there was actually a slope between the leisure centre and the cinema. There was actually a crossfall. As we move buildings up and down, it was actually a crossfall of 1 in 19, which is about 5%. And it looks like between the car park and the next one up, there's actually, if you look on the plan on page 75, there's actually gates, so you can't walk through that bit. So I think we keep tweaking these designs without actually having a nice master plan 3D model or whatever, so we can actually look at what we're getting. Because I'm most concerned that we're actually starting to not look at actually it being a walkable environment, and an environment where you can push your bikes through, etc. So I just want to say that and ask that if you are approving these things, that a plan is produced of actually the floor levels and the pavements, so actually we know we're not mucking things up by each time we tweak the locations of these buildings, and also to see that when we're moving these buildings, we're actually making movable space between them, because the gaps are quite small. It looks like, let's say, the gap between the car park and the leisure block, if you look on page 75, has got a gate across it, so it's not a public accessible one. And I'd really like a really nice plan that we can actually comment on these applications, seeing what the pavement levels are like. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask, do any members have any points of clarification they'd like to ask of Councillor Condacor? No? Okay. In that case, then, we have a recommendation to confirm the proposed amendments are acceptable as a non-material amendment to planning permission. Okay, so do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Smith, thank you. Does I have a seconder? Councillor Markham, thank you. Okay, I'll now open it up for debate. So do I have any members? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the officers a question, which is, if this wasn't for the fact it was Borough Council ownership, would this even be before us as a committee, or would it have been dealt with under officer delegated powers?
It would be dealt with under officer delegated powers, because non-material amendments are not a planning application. We don't have to advertise them, and we don't have to consult on them. Obviously, in the constitution that we've got at Nuneaton and Bedworth, we do ask at the moment for these to come to committee. But to be honest, this is the first time in my 34 years in planning I've known non-material amendments, even on council-owned land, coming to planning committee.
Thank you, Chair. I suspected that was the answer. Could I, whilst it's not a formal recommendation, could I ask your good offices, Chair, to write to the Chair of the Constitutional Review Working Party to ask them to consider whether it is still an appropriate element of the Constitution, because it does seem like it is a waste of officer time and committee time. If this was something else, any other person, then we wouldn't be doing this, and it just seems it's over the top.
I take your point, and I'm happy to do that, and I will do that in consultation with the head of planning and our head of planning officer as well. So between the three of us, I'm sure we can get a letter which we can all happily put our signatures to. Okay. Do I have any other speakers on this matter? No? Okay. So all those in favour? Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us on then, Karina, when you're ready, to our final item of the evening.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5 is for a non-material amendment to Planning Permission 038706 to secure obscure glazing to all windows at the first and second floor on the eastern elevation of the building at 17 to 23 Abbey Street. The application is being reported to committee as it relates to a major application on council-owned land where the council is also the applicant. The building was approved in January 2023 for the erection of a digital skills and innovation centre to include further education college and ancillary uses and a public restaurant. The proposed obscure glazing is sought to mitigate overlooking and privacy impacts upon the development proposed under application 039160, which relates to item 3 of tonight's committee agenda. It is not considered that the inclusion of obscure glazing would have any material impact on the views of the college building when viewed from the proposed public realm areas or Abbey Street. It is not considered that these changes would have a significant impact on the visual amenity and would not significantly or materially change the overall appearance of the approved scheme. It is therefore considered that the proposals are an acceptable non-material amendment. Planning Committee is recommended to confirm that the proposed amendments are acceptable as a non-material amendment to the original planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Condacor, I believe you wish to speak on this item as well. So you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The college application was one I was very keen on. Obviously, getting education in the town centre is really good. And I'm just a bit concerned about this vast number of windows all being obscure glazing, particularly for the staff working in the college. If you're working so it's got this sort of mottled glass all the time. And I do ask, it would be nice, because unfortunately there's not a diagram of the inside of the building to see what the classrooms are like relative to the windows. But in this place, yeah, we look out these top windows if it's a boring bit of council meeting and get some perspective and views. But if you're in quite a small room and you've got obscure glazing on your only windows in the room, I'm quite concerned of people working in that environment. So I do ask, do we need all the windows to be obscure? Because obviously, if you look at the other application which came earlier, there are actually 4 bedrooms and I think about 8 balconies opposite this. And obviously, you don't want opposite a bedroom for people from the college to look in. But I can't believe that every single window, all that fascia needs to be obscure. And if it does need to be obscure, can we have only obscure looking across? Because like here, we get some light coming through at a higher light. And the other thing that's not explained is how obscure, because some obscure glazing is actually quite matty. Whereas if you look at the top windows there, you can still see the shape of buildings. It's sort of I don't know if you know the sort of coarseness of the obscureness or whatever, but I really don't want people living and working in an environment that they can't actually get any sort of perspective or long views or daylight that's not totally matted out. So I don't know if the officers have got a particular level of obscureness in mind for this condition, but I think it is something that maybe someone should look at it so that it is still a decent working environment behind the obscure glass. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Do you want to come back on that at all?
Yeah, just to come back on that then, the rooms subject to the obscure glazing serve learning spaces. So classrooms, a pastry kitchen, multi-use workshop and a digital skills hub and also a staff room. Obviously none of those rooms are habitable. They don't serve a residential dwelling, and whilst it's preferable to get sort of as much natural daylight as possible into rooms, that there wouldn't be a planning reason to resist it. In addition, obviously it's a non-material application. There's no obscure glazing level that we've set out within the application, nor has the applicant set that out either. But as I say, it's a non-material planning application that wouldn't usually be presented at planning committee. Without the obscure glazing, you would have an issue in terms of the residential units proposed and just received a resolution to grant. In terms of the separation distances, it's only 7 metres, which is far below the separation distances required. So it would result in conflict with item 3 that we've just discussed at committee. So, thank you.
There are actually now quite a lot of schools and colleges that have gone down that obscure light, mainly to protect their students and the privacy for them. And as we say, it's not somewhere they're going to be living in. Most lessons are 1 to 2 hours that people have to be in that space, and they'll move out. And normally, new builds, they are very roomy, the classrooms. They're not small and pokey like the things that we might remember from the 1960s or the 70s. They are much, much bigger and spacious. And I can understand why they do it. It may seem strange and counterproductive, but there is, a reason also. It stops students staring out and keeps them more focused on their work, which is the other benefit of it. It's one less distraction, which I think most educators are thankful for. Okay, so we have before us then a recommendation to confirm the proposed amendments are acceptable and as a non-material amendment to planning permission. So do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Wilson and Councillor Smith. So I shall now open the floor for any points that people would like to make. Councillor Hammersley.
Just one really. I assume that the lighting inside, it works on so many lumens and whatever types of daylight, yellow light, brown, white, whatever, there will be a specification for the lights to help with this internal lack of daylight, shall we call it. Thank you.
That's not something the case officers put within the report, but usually that is dealt with under building regs in any case. I'd imagine that they'd be, trying to mitigate the loss of a bit of natural light as well. But it's not something I can completely confirm without the officer having reviewed it as part of the report.
Okay, any other members? No? Okay, in that case, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, so that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I'd like to that now concludes our business of the evening. I'd particularly like to thank all the residents who turned up to speak and participate earlier on in the evening. I now declare this meeting closed.